All right, ready to go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. This is the bond meeting, 11:30 a.m. I'm going to begin with roll call, which is myself, Alfonso Lopez, here. Gina Blackman Taylor,
Here.
Chad Conrad,
Present.
Abraham Camejo,
Here.
Mr. David Flatt,
Present.
Matt DeFalco,
Here.
Mr. Byron Goins,
I am present.
Robert Gerdison,
Present.
Todd Peterson,
Todd is here.
and Yvette Williams. I think she's in the midst of trying to get on virtually, but once she announces her presence, I will put it on the record. All right, guys. Moving on, let's all stand for the flag salute, please. All right, little note here, anyone willing to speak with public comment, we have a new system in play. There's blue cards in the back that you need to fill out and give to our Valerie up here so that we can prepare you to speak if you have public comment. So fill out the blue cards, please. All right, moving on to adoption of the agenda, item 1.02. I do have a small amendment for that adoption. It's to approve the adoption of the revised reference material for item 2.06, Bond Oversight Committee bylaws review. That would be the amendment for the adoption. I'll let you guys go over the agenda. If you guys see everything's correct, I will hold out for a motion.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Go ahead, Matt.
So the two copies that we got, one of them, I assume, is the original one, and one is the revised?
Yes, the final one. .06 is the final one, correct? Yeah, the one that's in the one that's actually in the packet already is the final.
I think I got two, one that has pink and one that has green.
Yes, it will be the pink one. Sorry about that, Matt. Got both. They sent it both.
No, this is me. Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's both,
I see.
pink
I
and
see.
green.
I see. I see. Yes, got it.
Okay, is everyone good with the agenda? I'll wait for a motion. And is there any public comment when it comes to this agenda as well? Hearing none, I will now wait for the motion to approve.
Chad Conrad, motion to approve the agenda.
I have a motion on the floor, Mr.
Dave
Chad
Flatt, a
Conrad,
second.
and I have Mr. Dave Flatt as a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. All right. Moving on to 2.01, approval of the minutes. Give you guys a few minutes to go over what we did. Or we're about to do, I'm sorry. These are minutes.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, Yvette, we can hear you with an echo, but we can hear you.
Is that better now? Do you still hear echo?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Williams. We'll mark Ms. Yvette Williams is also present for the Bond Oversight Committee here today on October 15th, 2024.
Yeah, I was on the call. I was trying to raise my hand, but my mic wasn't working, so I called in. I'm using the mic on my phone and my computer for visual.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Williams. We're on 2.01, approval of the minutes currently, just to catch you up.
Hey, Chair, can I make a
Go ahead,
change?
Abraham.
On page 5, Abraham Kameko for the record on page 5, where I said I have 4 children in the school district, I have 4 children in school. I have different children in college and everywhere else. So just want to, just get rid of the words district
Page 5 of what are we looking at?
of the minutes.
Oh, the minutes, okay. Gotcha. Are there any other corrections for last month's minutes?
I don't have any corrections, but Matthew DeFalco, for the record, just wanted to say thank you for staff. Those minutes are very extensive. Appreciate you putting those together.
Are there any other corrections for the minutes or questions at this point? If here none, I will await a motion.
Abraham Kameko for the record, I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
We have a
With-
motion by Mr. Abraham Camejo,
Dave Flat for the record, second.
David Flatt for a second motion. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to 2.02, reports of the chair, liaison representatives. I will first go on to Mr. Chad Conrad.
No updates today, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Abraham Camejo, under construction.
Abraham Kameko for the record. I only had a question for Brandon and his team. There was a meeting I went to the Board of Trustees, and it was regarding that consulting company that we're using the bond oversight funds for, regarding, I believe it was like $5 million. Can you just explain to everybody what the role and what they're going to be doing? I don't think we've ever had that discussion. And I know it was approved by the Board of Trustees, but we're just curious to see if you can elaborate to update everybody on this. And other than that, I have no other updates regarding construction.
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Yes, we actually are forecasting in November, we were going to have that consultant join us and the Attendance Zone Advisory Commission to give a brief overview of what their scope will be. It'll be about a 16-month endeavor they enter into, so it'll just be high level, here's what we're going to do, and then certainly open to, during that meeting, of what the engagement with the different committees will be and the trustees as well.
Okay, and that was at a cost of like $5 million that's coming from this bond for that consultant?
I believe it's about approximately $5.7 million, yep.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but thank you for letting us know.
Anyone else have any questions pertaining to Mr. Camejo's question on construction? Hearing none, moving on to Mr. Robert Gertison, under design.
Good morning. Nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Mr. David Flatt.
Mr. Chair, Dave Flat for the record, we didn't have any meetings, so I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Mr. Flatt. Mr. Matthew DeFalco.
I want to take a quick moment to express how inspired I am by our member, Yvette Williams. She's not just a member of this committee, but she's a leader in the community. She serves as the chair of the Clark County Black Caucus, and recently she experienced an unimaginable loss in her family, yet she continues to show up and give us all the work that she can. I think that's her unwavering dedication, especially in a challenging time, speaks volume about her character and her commitment to our community. Her strength and leadership is nothing short of remarkable, and I feel honored to work beside her. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeFalco. Moving on to Ms. Gina Blackman-Taylor, Community Relations.
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing to report at this time.
Now we will move on to 2.03, report by the Clark County Board of School Trustees Liaison. Ms. Lola Brooks, are you on virtually?
Hi, I am on virtually. I didn't have anything to report. I'm looking forward to listening to the conversation today. I appreciate the leaders working with me to make sure these bylaws are reflective of some of the feedback that we've received.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Moving on to 2.04, System Level Condition Index for Heating, Ventilation, and Air Conditioning. This will be a review, discussion. Mr. Brandon McLaughlin, the floor is all yours.
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. This listing here we'll get into. I first want to take the time to introduce the few members I am joined with here today. So I'm joined on my right-hand side by Mr. Doug Diaz. He's the Director of Facility Optimization and oversees much of our HVAC and heavy equipment maintenance within the Facility Services Unit to provide any specific requests that come before the committee today. As well, I'm joined on the left-hand side by Mr. Josh Chesnick. When I stepped into the role I currently hold, I left a hole in our construction management specific department, and Mr. Chesnick stepped into that role leading our construction management and our project execution. So I've asked him to join as a part of this discussion and transition him to more of the discussions as we continue. So with that, some high-level overviews of where this request originated. I know it was a request from the committee members, so happy to provide this now. A few high-level bullet points before we get into the discussion. I just want to remind people this is the System Condition Index, separate and apart from a Facility Condition Index. So the system is this specific component system, which HVAC system alone. If you remember, FCI is the Facility Condition Index, and that's the conglomeration of all systems across a campus's systems. And then that feeds into a ratio. The FCI is a ratio, simply the cost to repair over the cost to replace. And this is in alignment with Regulation 7112, which we have discussed as a committee before, which determines potential priorities the committee may recommend that provides an objective backdrop for our capital improvement planning into the future. So again, this is System Condition Index for HVAC alone, and that is it. And so with that, I'll turn it over for questions, comments, discussions regarding this listing.
Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Brandon McLaughlin pertaining to this index?
Abraham Kamau for the record. Can you explain the percentage on this, like the 1.25, 1.23? Can you explain for the record what the numbers actually mean for everybody?
Yeah, great question. So like I said, the Brandon McLaughlin for the record, again, these are reflective of a ratio. That's all they infer. So it is a anticipated cost to repair versus the cost to replace. So when it mentions 1.25, that means it is 125% of the cost to repair that component versus to replace that component. So if it were $100 to replace a given component, say a compressor, a fan belt, it is actually 125% to try to repair that same component type. So think of these as two digits to the right would just be simple percentages at that point was the easiest way I think about them.
Go ahead, Ms. Platt.
Mr. Chair, Dave Flatt for the record. I want to thank the staff and Brandon, your group that actually took the time to do all this for us. I really appreciate it. I know it's tough out there. Thank you.
Ms. Gina Blackman-Taylor.
Hi, Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. Thank you for really this complete report. A couple of questions. So one, in terms of how, I understand this is systems index versus a facility conditioning index. Does this number go into the facility conditioning index number in any way, shape, or form, or how do those two relate to each other?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record, great question. It is one component. I'd have to verify the number of systems that are weighed within that, but yeah, it's one component that plugs into the FCI that you ultimately see.
Okay, and then similar to the FCI, does that mean that these are reevaluated on a 5-year basis as with, is that when those systems are checked, or are they evaluated more regularly than that?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record, yeah, these are part of the, since they are part of the assessment cycle, the FCIs, it is once every 5 years.
Okay, so where we see essentially blanks, what can we presume from that? That they haven't been scheduled yet, they haven't been looked at yet, they're farther down the line?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record, I would say there's probably not a global response to that. The notes on the right-hand side just merely means anything we're open and aware to. I think to self-disclose a little bit, in preparation for this, we know Courtney Junior High School recently had a large modernization project, but it's high up on the list, which indicated to us that the assessment data just hasn't been rolled up until that yet. So
I see.
that data is likely 4 years old because the project was completed 2 years ago. So that's what some of the blanks could mean, but not
Okay.
global across all of them.
And then as we come into summer or school starting, when we see a lot of this like uptick in maintenance and air conditioning issues, how did those requests for maintenance end up affecting the system's number at all? How is that, does it correlate at all?
Great question. Brandon McLaughlin for the record. SCI and FCI data at large is actually a poor indicator of work order frequency. We've found that recurringly over time. Some great older systems that, yes, they might be difficult to find parts with antiquated catalogs of parts, oftentimes don't necessarily correlate with the most frequent items needing maintenance. So these are just, again, the ratio of cost to repair versus replace, not necessarily indicative of number of frequency of maintenance visits.
I see. So do we have any sort of policy alongside that maintenance, as we talk about that replacement structure, that is able to incorporate that indication that there might be larger ongoing problems that aren't being captured by a 5-year systems assessment?
So Brandon McLaughlin for the record, we, as a best practice, it's not in regulation, but we do solicit the feedback of the entire facility services unit. Hey, if we know a certain school is high on the FCI list and also has a high frequency of maintenance work orders, that is something we typically flag.
I see. And then, so these numbers aren't necessarily definitive for when, they're one aspect of when larger action is seen as being needed on a particular campus.
Right, Brandon McLaughlin for the record, yeah, this is again one of the probably dozens of elements of SCIs that plug in to make up the FCI at an entire campus. So you could have schools with very good HVACs, but very poor in other areas that would be causing a high FCI, and vice versa. You could have a low SCI score in, say, HVAC, but other components are doing really well at the campus, skewing that either direction.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have any questions virtually from anyone here for Mr. Brandon McLaughlin?
Hi, this is Todd Peterson. I have a quick question. I noticed that on some of the schools it says replacements are planned. And on some of these schools where it says replacements are planned, I believe these are some schools that are also eventually on the long list for the entire school to be replaced. So if a school's not slated to be rebuilt, whatever the correct wording is, in 10 years, does that mean that they will not have any HVAC replacements because it's not worth it? Because the building is ultimately going to be replaced and then the building is going to be hot with consistent air breaking down for 10 years? Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Great question, Mr. Peterson. Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Certainly, I think since 2021, at least since I've been aware of it, there's $15 billion in need and it's only $7.7 billion funded across the district. So it does leave schools that have seemingly no capital investment on system or facility improvements. I will say our facility services unit doesn't merely ignore schools that are slated for replacement and say are 10 years out. That's certainly not what's occurring. Doug and his team work extremely hard to continue to service equipment well past their useful life. So there are Minor other ways we can make capital investments in schools that either don't have capital replacements anytime soon or are very far off in the queue to receive some sort of relief if a systemic issue is identified and prioritized.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Peterson? Go ahead, Rob.
Hi, Rob Gerson, for the record. Just had a question about the SCI. So is there a dollar value that has been identified for the high priority schools for replacement? Or actually the whole thing? Has there been a dollar value attributed for improvements that are needed?
I guess I'm unclear of the question as far as, so yes, there's dollar values baked in here to get to the ratios that are utilized, but I would say there's ambiguity in how, when you say high priority or critical need, how are we defining that within it? Because I mean, in theory, the whole list could be a higher priority because even a school at 0.01, if their AC goes out, that is an issue, right? So I'd be hesitant to put a dollar figure on critical needs unless we defined it.
Okay. I was just, and this is the first time I'm seeing this, so I'm just getting used to the figures here. So I just looked at, there's about 366 schools I counted here, and about 13% were over 1. And didn't know if if there was like a impact or order of magnitude of understanding the cost of improving, let's say, the ones that are over 1.0.
Great question. We would love to, we can follow up with some of that and research it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gina.
Gina Blackman-Taylor, again, for the record. So one of the things that we've talked historically about this committee, in this committee, is how priorities for the district themselves have changed between building of new schools, modernizations, full-on replacements, and part of that is balancing the needs of capital improvements and repairs, to a certain extent maintenance as a part of that, along with other challenges in the district. Now, currently, we are still on the priorities that have been set by the Board of Trustees to work towards this full renovation, where modernization has been sort of de-emphasized. Not, I don't want to put words in your guys' mouth, but it's been, other aspects of capital improvement have taken a larger priority to a certain extent over a time period where there was a lot of focus on HVAC and roof work. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, I have the two individuals here that would be able to best speak to it. We certainly have decades of deferred maintenance across the district.
Right. And so one of the things that we're dealing with is that we're not dealing with all of these systems in a situation void of context. So the fact that we have incredible need throughout the district for capital funds means a necessary prioritization of different priority of different items within the district, whether we're building schools or whatnot. So with this upcoming attempt to do a capital improvement plan, is there a way to get sort of that updated bond assessment funds where, when you guys passed the money for in 2021, was it, where we had that sort of breakdown of how much was needed in modernization, how much was needed in new school construction, how much was needed in replacements, and where those gaps were? Is it possible to kind of see that visualization again? Because I think it's really important to understand how we're allocating those money across capital projects across the district. Does that make sense? Sorry, that was long-winded.
Yeah, Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, so you're just asking for an updated visualization of those needs?
Yeah, I think that's where we're because I think obviously there's needs in a lot of different areas, and choices were made in the past and even continue to be made about where that money is going to go and what priorities are going to be funded first. And so understanding where that has happened, and then if there is a need to shift those priorities, I think that becomes a part of the conversation. If we are reaching such a point where again, this issue has gotten so much more dire. Does it mean that we should be pulling and looking at our other priorities and shifting more from those areas?
We can certainly involve that in some of the updated visualization. I believe what we're likely to share next month with the firm that was selected and awarded the master plan contract, I think there's going to be a higher level visioning that likely has to happen about what schools, where and when are even necessary. So I would be hesitant to make it global that we need to prioritize more modernization dollars everywhere. It's going to be where do they need to be concentrated for their biggest efficiency within it. So, but it's certainly something we can prioritize and visualize throughout the process.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Brandon McLaughlin pertaining?
Matthew DeFalco for the record.
Go
I
ahead,
got a
Matt.
couple, Chair, if that's okay. This is an issue that kind of came up in the public that we heard from some parents and members of our community. First of all, is there anything that you want to say directly to the public in regards to this issue? We heard since the school year started that there were some issues in classrooms. Some of the classes were canceled. Is there anything you want to say to the public right now about where the district is at in regards to HVAC issues?
I'll speak on behalf of the Facility Services Unit. Our team worked extremely hard given the circumstances, and yes, we are aware of the newscast that came out during that era. I do want to emphasize that we had at no time less than 80% of full occupancy and operation throughout all of our school buildings. So while the numbers are reflective of a poor condition for that school at that given moment, there was an overwhelming majority of schools that had fully operational HVAC systems where students were in their classrooms learning with the best of intent. So again, given the circumstances and budgetary allocations awarded by the district and the state, for our maintenance department, they are performing at or above benchmarks for the size and scale that we are and they are. So.
Thank you very much, Brandon. I appreciate that. Second question, given the roles and responsibility of our committee, in your expert opinion, is there anything that we as a committee can recommend to the full school board to help with this issue?
Great question, Mr. DeFalco. Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Correlating to Ms. Blackman-Taylor's request, I think the simple ask I'd have for you guys is, as a committee, if you find this data not to be satisfactory, yes, I would simply ask you guys make recommendation to the trustees to direct the superintendent to review different allocations or priorities. But I think that's already ongoing with this facility master plan effort. But certainly these numbers are not fantastic. We acknowledge that. So that's the only thing I'd ask from you guys. Within your purview, if this isn't satisfactory, just let your trustees know to vote in that direction.
Thank you very much for taking the time to put this together and for being here to talk to us.
Chair, Abraham Kamahu for the record. With this master plan, with the consulting company coming on with like almost $6 million, are they going to be looking into the scope of things like this, like the air conditioning and other aspects of it? Because at the same time, I feel that it's almost $6 million that we could allocate these funds to repair and replace these HVACs. I continue to get the families and teachers to reach out, and they're actually they're afraid of retaliation from the district, so they don't want to say exactly what school. But I spoke with the teacher, and for safety concerns, classrooms was over almost 90 degrees in one of the classrooms. So I'm gonna go as a safety guy now. A lot of parents, a lot of community members, especially in the historic West Side, East Las Vegas, Sunrise Manor, my community, don't know how to file a complaint with the Southern Nevada's Health District when the temperatures reach 85 degrees. They don't know this. They're not informed. They don't know. And the district honestly does not cancel school when the building is hot or when the building is too cold. It makes it a non-pleasurable learning environment, not only for our students, but also for the workers of the school district. And there's heat regulations that have been passed and approved by Nevada OSHA and federal OSHA where heat requirements are necessary. when workers are outside in the heat, we're supposed to put shade on them, give them rooms of breaks, but yet we have classrooms that have excessive heat in there, and I have a kindergarten teacher that she wants to remain anonymously, but she's thinking about quitting because her classroom is too hot. These are things, I encourage everybody to go into the parent links on Facebook and have these conversations. These are the things I'm hearing. And as much as I appreciate all this work with the assessments, I think we're not prioritizing the main, and I know it's maintenance and bond oversight, but at the same time, we need to work with you guys to be able to ask our trustees where to allocate this money in case we do need to replace these units. Because having units that don't have parts or can't get fixed and still have classroom being had, I think that's a problem. And at the end of the day, we want to just have a safe learning environment and stuff. For the public to know, what is the school district's emergency plan when a school has no AC? Is a principal allowed to contact an outside contractor when the district or facilities can't get to it on time? Because if it doesn't get to it on time, why isn't school being canceled? So maybe you can help me out with that question with facilities.
If I may interject, and I know the response is going to seem harsh, Mr. Cameo. Again, that teeters on operations, and all school principals are equipped with those emergency response plans. So yes, Mr. Diaz could talk about our emergency provisions from a technician side, but again, maximization of the bond fund is the purview of this committee, not the responsiveness to failing or decades of deferred maintenance on those same pieces of equipment.
I appreciate it, but that is the problem because we're not maintaining the decades of maintenance, and now we're going into the replacement. We have a whole list of school of when these assessments were completed. We don't know exactly when. 5 years to do an assessment on any property. I mean, I have to do regular maintenance on my home every summer just to make sure that the machine's going to be working because we're in extreme weather. But I understand that it's facilities, but at the same time, when we're spending $6 million on a consultant, and I have schools that need full HVAC replacements, I think we're spending our money incorrectly.
Mr. Mayo, I appreciate your opinion. The trustees chose to award that contract, so.
Oh, I understand they awarded, but we never even had that discussion as a board. That's my issue as well. You presented it to the trustees. Did anybody on the committee ever hear about that consultant for $6 million? I don't think so. See, that's the problem. We're misspending our money, Brandon.
If I may, Mr. Cameo.
Go ahead.
The consultant that's hired for $6 million, I don't want to say is a drop in the bucket, but we have a $7 billion fund that needs to be properly allocated, and the priorities of revision 5 in 2021 are not currently in alignment with that, given the data we have obtained since 2021. So this firm is slated to go do third-party validation of all the assessment data. So we're not using 5-year-old data. And so all the scope that we're going to present in November of what they've been contracted for will outline exactly that. So I think it's premature to criticize what this firm has successfully done for other districts in Nevada and throughout the country about having a very robust assessment process, a very robust community engagement process, and ultimately a very successful outcome for tough situations that our district is about to encumber with, given where we are with enrollment and funding. So again, hold tight for November. I understand your perspective and opinion on it, but I think it's premature.
I appreciate it, Brandon. Hey, Ron, for the record, also that company, the consultant doesn't even have a Nevada state license. Yeah, look into it, guys. Yeah, they do business around the country, but they're not registered with Silver Fume. I mean, I just do basic checks. So,
And Mr. Cameo, Trustee Brooks researched Silver Flume on the dais at the meeting it was approved at. So I don't appreciate the incorrect statements.
well, should have been brought up to the meeting so we can had this discussion and then presented. That's the problem with the oversight. There's no oversight on these funds. You presented this to the Board of Trustees. We're spending $6 million. They approved it. We never had this discussion. We're waiting for it. You see the disconnect on all
Abraham,
this?
your point's been given.
Thank you.
Is there
Thank you,
anything
Chair.
else you want to add to it?
No.
Okay. Are there any other questions pertaining to this topic of 2.04 from the board? Are there any questions virtually? Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure because I'm having to use my phone as my speaker. So, Mike, I guess, we can go round and round on this. I guess the bottom line is, as an advisory committee, what then, based on the information that we've seen here today regarding the air conditioning units, does this body feel is appropriate advice to offer our Board of Trustees as it relates to the air conditioning report and our budget? So is the committee prepared to offer some advice to the Board of Trustees?
Is this a direction any of the other board members would like to chime in on, if this is a route we want to take?
Hi, Yvette. It's Gina Blackman-Taylor. In terms of advice for the trustees, it kind of goes to the question and the discussion that we were having earlier, which is that I personally don't feel comfortable taking this issue on in isolation from other priorities. So if we recommend that they emphasize modernization projects without knowing how that would affect new school construction and replacement construction, I don't have a solid recommendation that I would make at this second. But what I want to do, and I hope that we do as well, we look at some of these other funds and we see where that allocation lies. And we see exactly, and we can, especially when we have a master planning document coming up, that for the long term, I think that's where we have that more robust conversation about how we are shifting these priorities. So I see this as step one of getting the necessary information about a really important aspect of capital spending overall. But I don't feel like it's quite yet enough it's only one piece of the puzzle that I think we're still trying to build, if that makes sense. This is just my 2 cents.
That makes sense, and thank you for that. This is my only concern, is we spend money every month. And so as we know, our budget not our budget, but our spending is very fluid, depending on, what fire needs to be put out. And so I think that, and, I know we're going to have a discussion on the bylaws in a minute, but I really think that we need to really start thinking in terms of changing our mindset around how do we engage with our trustees when it comes to this. If we're an advisory committee, then it's going to be on a regular basis that things will come before us that we may want to offer some advice, even if that advice is, listen, we have a ongoing problem with these classrooms and their the temperature in them, whether it's too cold or too hot, broken heaters in the winter, broken air conditioners in the summer. Even if the advice is this is something that us as a body feel or want to advise the trustees on getting more of a handle on. Now, that may not be in a bigger sense of a master plan. Maybe it is, but I think with an organization as big as we are, these are going to be operational issues that are going to happen all the time. And I think if we're going to really provide our due diligence based on the mission of this committee, then I think these are things that come to light that we hear that they may not hear, that we need to be able to maybe say, hey, this is an ongoing issue. It's been an ongoing issue. Be able to get those facts and then be able to present something to them around further discussion that they may want to have. Now, they may choose not to, and that's their choice not to. But at least we're doing our due diligence and making sure that we are making them aware. I just see us as more of a liaison kind of a committee in between, looking at the, crossing the Ts, dotting the Is, and looking at drilling down on information that they obviously they're already extended, looking for us to help them with being able to identify some of these. I don't want to call it an eyesore, but let's just call it that. And so I don't think there's an answer for it today. I just wanted to propose that, put that kind of out there, just in us as operating in the future. This is going to be really our role. So how do we then do that as best we can to support them?
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Al Lopez, for the record, just pertaining to your point, that's part of the bylaws that we'll be discussing later, to where it's going to be having myself report to the trustees in a public venue, these different concerns throughout the year. So keep that in mind, but that's in the works as well. Just for that communication purpose.
Matthew DeFalco, for the record, if it's all right, I support what you were just saying, Member Williams, 100%. I think that's important for us to get out on the record and to push the board on this issue, both in the immediate term in terms of the issue that we're talking about now and doing that a lot more in the long term. And I'd also like to hear, Brandon, if you could just repeat one more time, is there anything that you recommend or you think that we should recommend as a committee to the full school board to help on this issue? I think it might be helpful to hear that just one more time.
Brandon McLeod, for the record, I'll try to remember exactly what I said, but yes, certainly connected to Ms. Blackman-Taylor's remarks as well. Just simply, if this data is not satisfactory, which it sounds like it is not, then yes, I would recommend that you guys all appointed by trustees and our representative of trustees would simply, this is step one within it, like to the point raised that now we have awareness of this, and now what are we going to do with that in consultation to the full board?
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Chair, I have one more question.
Go ahead, Mr. Reagan.
Abraham Kamel for the record. Can you help explain to the public and to the committee when a school has an issue with the air conditioner, for example, and they want to use site funds to reach out to facilities to fix it and cover those? At what certain percentage or money does it convert into the Bond Oversight Committee, especially when a lot of the schools won't have funds as they did with the carryover money, being with the other budget, but with the schools itself losing carryover funds that they can use to provide maintenance for facilities to address these issues. So let's say there's an elementary school that doesn't have these funds anymore. At what point does it transition into the next piggy bank, which is Bond Oversight? Can you explain that process for us?
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, to put it simply, general maintenance, site funded, would all be outside of the purview of bond. The only time it would become bond is when that deferral of maintenance creeps up to a place where it registers within the criteria of utilizing bond funds toward that replacement or repair. But I'd say overwhelmingly, it has been demonstrated through statutory review that 332 funds for maintenance to school-based administrators is not actually achievable. It would be outside of their autonomy as a school. They do not have the ability to call up a given plumber off the street to come fix a clog. They do rely upon our well-skilled and equipped central maintenance teams. Have investigated how to utilize those to schools, but it proved to be past its feasibility nor statutory ability.
Thank you for answering it. Wouldn't it help the district if we had that as an ability, though, when facilities can't handle it, and to avoid using bond oversight funds, the expense, to help, because it's right in the thin line. Is it bond oversight or is it facilities? So I'm trying to say, because there's going to be a certain point where a school won't have it's funds or carryover money, and they won't have the funds to go through the facilities. So it is going to trickle down sooner or later to this committee on allocating those funds. So that might be a discussion that the trustees might need to have. You know, your recommendations would be highly appreciated, because I know we're just taking the first step in all this.
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, Mr. Cameo, I don't know that it's a fine line. It's pretty clean cut. If one of Doug's guys goes and works on a piece of equipment, it's general funded, non-bond funded whatsoever. And as far as what it could eventually lead to, I mean, deferred maintenance has been a practice going on at the district for a very long time. So it wouldn't be much different of how that deferred maintenance causes a backlog, call it, of items that then need to be replaced. So that's not to say that's a reason to continue that behavior, but it certainly wouldn't be out of the norm of how things have been running for a very long time.
Thank you for answering those questions, Brandon.
Okay, are there any other questions pertaining to 2.04 from the board? Go ahead, Matt.
Do we want to come up with some language to recommend to the board?
At this point, we could probably put that under, well, I'm not sure if this was legal. Is this the proper time to try to come up with something, or should we do that under old business or new business?
Sammy Randolph, for the record. The way it's currently phrased as the agenda item, it's just for discussion and presentation. So if you're going to, it would have to be agendized properly if you're going to take some kind of action and vote on some type of recommendation. So
Gotcha.
it's not
So
consistent with the existing item.
sounds like we'll have to put it on a future agenda item, if that's the role you want to, the path you want to take. But yeah, definitely we'll address that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee or virtually pertaining to 2.04? Hearing none, is there any public comment pertaining to 2.04 system level heating, ventilation, and air conditioning? Hearing none, moving on to 2.05, construction cost trends. Once again, Mr. Brandon McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brandon McLaughlin. I'll let my colleague join here settle in before we get started. Settled, fully settled. Great. So we'll get rolling here. So again, some brief introductions. I have asked Mr. Justin Peterson with OCMI to co-present this data with me. So OCMI represents an overwhelming majority of the construction cost estimates that our design professionals do submit to the district, and they also provide schedule review. They're a very instrumental partner in much of what we do. So he'll be able to provide a lot more industry knowledge of what's going on out there throughout the presentation, as well as the follow-ups he may have. So certainly this has been a long overdue discussion, I believe, since 2021, and we've been talking about it probably since late 22 as construction contracts started to become get encumbered from Revision 5 in late 21. I think the sticker shock was astounding when we sat in our first few, and I know Mr. Gertison was in the room with us when some of those first cost estimates were starting to come in. Certainly, where do we go from here was the first question of how the heck do you try to prioritize a bond program that was supposed to cost $3.5 billion and is now costing, or projected to cost, close to 5-point-something million by best estimations. So obviously there has to be a prioritization of projects, which is what you guys saw before you back in June for the reprioritization, or at least to set the stage for a facility master plan to reevaluate what those priorities wanted to be long term. Cost is a huge component to that, one of the biggest components, with a lot of strings attached to it. So just high level, we're going to dig into some of these critical issues. And then we'll look both locally and nationally, as well as some of the things that we've already preemptively done to try to mitigate some of these cost increases. So with that, we'll get going on the overview portion. So certainly since 2020, this is a slide we presented back in June. Costs have gone up approximately 42% on material alone. This fed into additional items such as material shortages, labor constraints, and increasing demand across the nation, frankly. And those trends have had significant impacts on the projects that we are able to fund through bond projects, which then affects our budget allocations and timeframes predominantly. That if we don't have the workforce be doing what we've committed to, that also starts to cause things to slide in time frame, thereby increasing costs with escalation. So the item on the right-hand side is merely just a thing put out by the American General Contractors Association in support with the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, just indicating what some of these changes were from, say, February of 2020, just before the pandemic, to where this was snapped, I believe, in February of this year. So, or April of this year, rather. So, Mr. Peterson, anything additional to that?
No addition.
Okay. In reviewing what the things that are affecting cost increases the most, I believe these three rows out as the most prominent attributes of it. So material shortages, as much as people want to believe COVID-19 has fully surpassed, there is still material constraints and labor constraints as a result of that we have, and especially in areas such as lumber, steel, and concrete. Electrical is probably another close fourth within that as well. A second core area was labor constraints. So with skilled labor shortages across the nation, we've seen less competition, thereby workers are able to demand higher costs for their labor, and as well as just their availability. With so much work going on all around the valley, the region, and the nation, they can be a lot more selective within it. And last is the increased demand. So there still is a lot of economic uncertainties, and demand for construction is up. So like I mentioned, they're able to just command higher prices for materials and services.
Good afternoon, Justin Peterson for the record. This slide right here contains kind of a summary of the slide deck. And it's got some statistics on the left that compare the national averages versus Las Vegas and Nevada. And you can see that there's some similarities in materials and labor pricing between those two markets. However, the totals are different, and we'll speak to those in a little bit as we move through the slides, and Mr. McLaughlin already has. Southern Nevada, the total cost of construction is higher than the national average, not significantly higher, but it is higher, and that's something that we understand happens in smaller marketplaces like this. On the right-hand side of the slide, we talk about some of the factors that are contributing to that delta between the 34% and the 50%. And the primary one is that the local market remains very impacted. There is a lot of construction, as you all notice as you drive around town, including the road construction. But the CCSD program is one of the larger programs that is distributing dollars out into the construction marketplace at multiple billions. It is one of the largest construction owners in the marketplace. However, there are others, including the state, other branches of Clark County, including the Department of Aviation, the Water Reclamation District, real property, and then the cities have their jobs as well as their projects, as well as NDOT. Construction, all that work has resulted in elevated demand for construction employment, and you'll see in a couple slides that it's more elevated locally here than nationwide. This is reflected in the number of bidders per project, which is the numbers are quite low. Occasionally, there's 1 to 2 bidders or just a couple bidders, and occasionally there's just one bidder, and that can affect construction price. And all of these result in increased premiums, these factors. Want me to do this one too? Sure. So this construction cost escalation is not unique to just Las Vegas. It is a nationwide and potentially worldwide occurrence. We do have offices throughout the United States, and we do a lot of cost estimating for a lot of public works agencies and publicly funded agencies, and so we've witnessed similar cost escalation, essentially post-pandemic. There are variability for different marketplaces. Popular marketplaces like Southern Nevada and Northern Nevada have experienced higher impacts than other parts of the country. And it's generally, construction's generally been more expensive post-pandemic than pre-pandemic. Slide, please. So I just have a couple line graphs, and the first couple relate to national numbers. Let's see. So as you can see, this is also from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and from the Federal Reserve Economic Board, is the source for a lot of these figures right here. Nationwide construction costs, we took us in some of these slides back to 2019, so there's a little bit of variability between whether you're comparing to 2020 or 2019. But the construction cost for schools, they do track that independently, is up approximately 34%. And you will notice there's cumulative curves and then year by year, and you can see the significant jumps that occurred coming out of the pandemic, anywhere from 20 or 10 to 20% or more across the nation. So it was a national phenomenon. One thing of interest, though, is that things have started to temper. The material pricing started to temper fairly recently, so that's advantageous for construction programs. Slide. This slide deals specifically just with the material cost index, and you can see the light green line, the one to the lower right is kind of month by month. And that it's settled over the last year and a half. This was something that I think the marketplace and everybody anticipated after a couple of years of elevated prices. They anticipated that there would be a leveling at some point, and maybe even some reduction, and that's what's happened nationally. Material pricing can fluctuate much faster than labor pricing, so it's much more reactive. And certainly specific events like natural catastrophes that we've unfortunately experienced recently can really drive up the price of certain commodity elements. Next slide, please. This is a shared slide. Like to take it?
So certainly there's been an impact on the Las Vegas construction market, I think, without reading too heavily here from the slide, but in recent years we've been in a growth mode. This is related to our economic development and tourism initiatives. So we are seeing more and more families attract here, which has caused roadways to want to be upgraded and additional funding flows coming from, say, federal stimulus packages, all contributing to just an abundance of projects going on right now locally. This rise in construction costs has then had very tangible effects on projects funded by public bonds, which then run into overruns and delays, thereby causing additional cost impacts. So this has not been exclusive to school projects alone. We've seen this, and in talking with colleagues at all their municipal agencies here locally, this is infrastructure upgrade, roadways, dams, drainage detention facilities, and other public facility improvement, rec centers, things like that. So everybody in the public sector is experiencing consistency of pricing that we've seen. So it is not a school district alone thing.
Justin Peterson for the record. So this next slide demonstrates construction employment change over time. And as Nevada continues to expand, it's offered ranges of goods and services to become a more diverse state. The state, and I've lived here for 27 years, does still continue to exceed kind of some of the natural average, or I'm sorry, the national average, the highs and the lows in many of the economic categories out there. So there is some truth to the boom and bust part of Nevada still to this day. And in this particular slide, you can see that the demand for construction employment greatly exceeds that of the national average at 20%, 26% versus the national average of 10%. So that's a representation of the impacted marketplace. Next slide. And this is the labor component, comparing national to Clark County prevailing wage. While there's a greater demand for construction workers, prevailing wage determinations are generally updated annually or semi-annually for some trades. So wage fluctuation is not as dynamic as material pricing, and you can see that there is some corollary here between Clark County and the national average increases. Next slide, please. And finally, a slide that's kind of dedicated to CCSD. This compares construction costs and construction escalation pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. And it's based on the construction cost per square foot of enclosed building structure in the program, primarily for new or replacement projects that include new buildings. So this is not modernization. We did not chart the modernization just because we wanted to kind of show, we've been talking about new construction and all the other prior slides, so this is an equivalent. There's no question that the increases are considerable at 50% or so. However, material pricing is up 40% and labor's up 20%. Those two combined, you do not combine those two. You've got to merge those two. So overall, locally, pricing is higher than the national average, and there are reasons for that. As we've discussed, it's an impacted market here is a primary factor. One other side note, or another possible contributing factor is the transition from some of the prototype designs into new prototype designs. It was necessary to keep up with best practices and what's happening in the education world. And so some of the prototype designs had the benefit of being constructed over and over again. There was a lot of vetting that had been done to those. There was a lot of value engineering. Everybody knew in the town how to build those. So there were some lower risk levels, but now that we've started new prototypes, we anticipate seeing that familiarity start to result in leveling of prices as well. Thank you.
So as we conclude, a few strategies for mitigating what we've been seeing in construction costs escalation. These are just some very high level items, but proactive planning. So contingencies was one area. And what I mean by just, it's simple to include a project contingency in it, but a lot of the risk we were seeing in bids was bidders trying to buy on that risk. So if they're going to be at risk for something, they will then bid that as a part of their lump sum agreement. But when we were able to identify, hey, we know you're concerned about X, it might be the material costs of this major component, we were able to identify that as a separate contingency if needed, and their bid was able to come down. So there was a few instances where we did exercise things like that, where we were able to proactively engage with different partners on that. Mr. Peterson also mentioned value engineering. I think, again, Mr. Gertis was in the room with us for much of this effort. Our schools are very efficient. Our area per student and our capacity of utilization is some of the highest utilization and some of the lowest area per student across the country. So our buildings are very efficient. Our operators, including Mr. Peterson, are some of our best that operate it with the limited footprints they have. But we did continue to evaluate the different wall treatments, the different flooring types, the different ceiling assemblies, the different ceiling types, all these contributing factors that, hey, I can get it bigger, faster, cheaper, right? Were explored, and there was a thorough documentation process across our project teams and continues to go on even to this day in many of our projects. And last was collaboration. And so the one share out of this I want to do is just engaging our stakeholders. So in summer of 23, we did just that. We engaged a series of our top tier construction partners, got them around the table saying, we know this phenomenon is not going away. So how do we become a better partner in allowing you guys to become better partners with, say, your subcontractor market? So we're able to obtain potentially better prices. A series of recommendations came out of that, so coalesced to a simplified list, more or less better, faster drawing quality, staggering of large bid opportunities. Don't have $300 million projects bidding all in the same week was one resounding thing we heard. Staggering bid awards to the notice to proceed. So the way we were currently structured, it was you got approved at a Board of School Trustees meeting. The following Monday, you were expected to have all your cranes and equipment out there ready to go, which was a little unfair. So we have proactively tried to look at that process of working with them. Hey, you got approved, we're executing contracts, and then they're able to mobilize with sufficient time so they can actually hit the ground running when they do get on site. So additional things were increasing the review of, say, change orders. I know that it's maybe not a glamorous word, but there are minor changes that often happen in construction projects. But just having that good faith with the subcontracting community the general contractors believe would obtain better subcontractor pricing, along with, like I mentioned, the administrative notice to proceed. So just having 4 or 6 months of just procurement time. Like we talked about, procurement and material availability was a large component. And if I had 4 months to just let the material start to roll in, do submittals, allow that to receive at my warehouse, we were seeing reduced pricing opportunities in that. And just at maybe a closing one, utilization of more collaborative project delivery methods. There is a propensity to go design, bid, build, and there is economic indicators that would say that is our most cost-effective delivery method, but it is the least collaborative. So that's where you do see excessive change orders or lowballing that happens at bid day, but they make it back on change orders. So by having open collaborative delivery methods, which are allowed by statute, say construction manager at risk or design build opportunities, that led to more equitable pricing on both directions. The contractors felt comfortable with the number they had, and we felt like we were getting what we paid for on day one. Was a few of the proactive steps that we were able to take just from a collaborative standpoint. Like we said, when we noticed this in summer of 23, we were able to start to wrap our hands around it. So last slide here is just the sustained rise is continuing. We have projects that want to bid here very shortly, and we continue to see the numbers rising. Maybe not to the degree we've observed the last 2 years, but it is stabilizing to that effect. But it's not going away. So by understanding some of the factors we presented here today, we are hopeful to just get more collaboration around this and find more proactive strategies. But also I think we need to start proactively planning toward there is cost indicators, recognizing that we won't be able to make all of the commitments that were in, say, a 2021 capital improvement plan due to the construction costs being observed. So that's why we're entering into the process we are next year, later this year into next year, about what does truly need to be prioritized from a capital funds perspective. So with that, we'll close it and open it for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Brandon McLaughlin?
Matthew DeFalco for the record. The recommendations that you brought up at the end of that, have they been implemented? And can we get those in writing?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Yeah, many of them have been implemented because they're just operational items. So we have implemented a lot of those. And yeah, certainly we can provide the memorandum that developed a lot of it.
Thank you for that. And I'd recommend to the committee that we think about a future agenda planning about recommending those to the board.
Thank you, Mr. DeFalco. Are there any other questions for Mr. Brandon McLaughlin? Go ahead, Chad.
Mr. Peterson, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate that. Thank you. A couple questions for you that relate to your firm's work. Do you do forward-looking projections? Do you like for any specific pricing? Do you provide any guidance to the district on forward-looking information?
Yes, we do. And we have for quite some time, dating back to prior bonds as well. I'm sorry, Justin Peterson for the record. We are an independent cost estimating firm. So one of our services is to estimate the price of construction today and then escalate it with forward projections based on project timelines.
Okay, thank you. Then I guess similar related question to Mr. McLaughlin. Do you use that forward-looking information to provide guide rails around your decision-making with bids with contractors?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record, yeah, we do utilize OCMI services directly and indirectly. So they most oftenly subconsult with a lot of our prime architects in developing those forward-looking, but we as a macro level do oftentimes directly contract with OCMI to be able to project those program-wide budgetary projections that we've used to infuse, say, Revision 6 recommendations to the committee and the board as well. So yeah, we do use both with them.
Okay, thank you. I have a few more, so bear with me. Does OCMI review the cost of projects that have already taken place, like specific projects? Do you evaluate or review or provide any guidance to the district on construction that's taken place, bids that are in place, pricing that we know that's concrete, not forward-looking but historical? And do you have an opinion on the district's like project spend and whether or not the projects that we're seeing are in line with the markets, the national data that you're receiving?
Shall I? Okay, Justin Peterson for the record, and maybe Brandon we could share the response to this question. So one primary function when we are a subconsultant to an architectural firm providing independent cost estimates is to develop those cost estimates from the early stages of design through the design process, and that process might span an entire year. And the purpose of that is to ensure from an early stage that the design is going to potentially bid within an anticipated range so that that meets the budget. So at that point, we're very hands-on all the way up through the design phase, right to the beginning of construction. Our role after the construction starts is switches away from cost and over to scheduling. But there's usually not significant changes to the cost once the project has bid and gone to construction into the construction phase. And I thought I was understanding that was part of your comment there. Go ahead.
And if I can clarify, yeah, one of the common reports we get from OCMI is what they call a variance report. That's a very common report we've obtained from, say, where was their last estimate to where was the actual bid from a general contractor come in at. And oftentimes they are extremely close, plus or minus 1% or 2%.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the clarification there. I don't think I quite understood what your role was, so that makes sense. And I think two more. Just looking at the high-level data that was presented, it appears that much of the cost, many of the cost areas that we're looking at have leveled off or appear to be leveling off in the past like 6 to 9 months, probably between like late 23 into 24. Is that translating into the bids that you're receiving on projects now? Are you seeing contractors bidding in a way that appears to be leveled off like the data appears to show?
You want me to start? Yeah. Okay. Justin Peterson for the record. Yes, so part of depending upon the delivery method, there are two primary delivery methods for projects. One's competitive bid, and the other is construction manager at risk. During the competitive bid lump sum for a fixed fee delivery method, there's no interaction with the contractor until bid day. For the other delivery method, construction manager at risk, there's a lot of parallel estimating that occurs in order to be an independent check on the process. And so during that process, that's when we start to hear things recently, fairly recently from the contractors that the market's starting to soften. And so some of their unit pricing is starting to kind of level out.
Okay, and last one then, for Mr. McLaughlin, do you have any procedures, or does the district have any procedures in place that either pauses, stops, reevaluates a project if it reaches a certain level of expected spend over the original anticipation? So like original budget, original expectation, is there any point in the process where it reaches a new cost estimate where you would change the process?
Yeah, Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Great question, Mr. Conrad. We certainly have contingency within our bid. I'd be hesitant to state that percentage publicly because then all of our bids would come in that percentage higher right now. But we do have a certain allowance within the budgets we do set. I'd say the first elementary schools out the gate when we approved CIP Revision 5 in 2021 into 2022, those were red flags for us, and those were in excess of 50% over. So there are red flags, and usually it's a conference with senior district leadership, whether to proceed or not, or address with the board in different fashion. So we do try to raise those if it comes to light.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, board, are there any other questions? Go ahead, Abraham.
Abraham Cabell for the record. Bless you. How does this affect our bond rating for the school district in general? With this continued, the increases, the ups and downs and stuff, how's that looking, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as we're looking for the bond ratings that we have?
Mr. McLaughlin, or Brandon McLaughlin for the record, Mr. Camino, I don't want to blanketly say they don't affect it, but it's separately related. The bond rating itself is based upon a myriad of other factors that actually Mr. Conrad would probably outdo me in knowledge of, but there's other things that contribute to bond rating than construction costs effects. So yes, they're related, but not probably to the degree I think you're leading with.
Okay. No, yeah, it's just a question to try to see it because, we have the state legislature coming and it's going to be on the topic for future bonds.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next one, I'd say one of the greatest contributors toward our bond rating itself is in fact our excess statutory reserve, which was a process set up by the now former CFO of the district that did keep our bond rating high. So two different vehicles to demonstrate faith upon your bond issuances is either 2% of your general operating budget or 25% of next year's debt service. And so we've always kept higher than that to improve our bond rating, and we continue to do that as a practice.
Thank you. With the current situation with the budget, do you think it's going to affect our bond moving forward with how until the financial storm weathers through? Do you think that's going to hurt our ratings? Just estimating.
Brandon McLaughlin for the record, I don't think so. Like I mentioned, we have other mechanisms within our financial portfolio that distill or that demonstrate the ability to repay debt by the district. So I don't think it'll affect our ability to bond and build more schools.
Okay, thank you. With the current shortage on workers and nationwide, wouldn't this be a good opportunity to maybe do some more outreach for smaller contractors and maybe not give them the whole, more subcontractors and invite more firms to bid maybe on remodeling projects versus a new build? You guys mentioned that we're only getting 1 to 2 bids per project, and I think that's concerning because they're coming in with a very high price, but if we can invite more firms and help qualify them to be able to do business with the school district, I think that would help lower the cost. And second, what are the requirements for our diverse groups of employment? I know there's a diversity report, but who are we hiring and who are we putting into to work for our schools, from our community? Are we, what's the percentage for our community, for the African American community, or Hispanics or Asians and stuff? Not just the business owner itself that meets a diversity check, but our actual workforce. So how is the school district, dealing with this, or what's the plan?
So Brandon McLaughlin for the record. I'm trying to remember the clarity of your first question. So yes, we would highly encourage smaller mom and pop operations to bid on work. I think the challenge has become the requirements for public works projects, the scale we're at. Even smaller jobs like minor renovations is still a process that many don't want to enter into. But we have been proactive in that light. We've gotten with some of our larger guys, larger general contractors, to go after those smaller businesses to say, yeah, we're not the big Goliath that the district wants to portray. It's, no, you can't, there's a pathway for you, there's project types for you. And so we've tried to connect some of those dots, and certain companies like Martin Harris and Penta have been great partners in that they don't want the work per se, they want their smaller guy to be getting the work. So they're willing to be a vehicle for some of that. And we've attended some of their events with them, as well as making industry presentations to small business training programs offered by, I believe, the UNLV Small Business Instructional, I forget their acronym right now, but there's been a lot of outreach opportunities we've been engaging with. The second attribute of your question about diversity, I would simply respond back with the report we gave in February about workforce, not necessarily firm ownership. Distills a lot of that, of what the percent we're doing with diverse workers, not necessarily just ownerships.
Abraham, come out for the record. Thank you for those answering those questions. Would your team in the district, would you guys be willing to maybe help the smaller companies, contractors, during a provisional time for they can get that experience? Because many times they can't bid because they don't have that experience under them as a general contractor. So maybe if we did like a supervision project and like help them qualify for these, that can actually diversify and get more of these smaller workforces, to come in and to work with Martin Harris, with the Pentas, with all Fives Construction, and with the big guys.
I'd say two legs to that. Yes, and we have projects all the way down through from $10,000 to move a wall all the way through $100 million middle schools. So I think there's natural pipeline even within the program, but in a dual track to that, if somebody wants to bite off maybe more than they can chew at this given moment, we have done that too, to say we've partnered a smaller tier mechanical subcontractor with a large general contractor to perform the one specific building within a multi-building campus building or construction. It's been mildly successful. There's been times it's been extremely successful, and there's been times where it's been very contentious and now litigious. So both scenarios, we want to believe that could be a pathway forward, but we haven't seen it formalized enough yet where we could rely upon it.
Thank you. One more question. How many small projects would a small contractor need to complete correctly for them to be considered, let's move you to the next level, let's say, and then we can give them more projects? Is there a plan for like a succession for a contractor to go up?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. There's not a formalized criteria, though that could be a good procedural element we can define, but merely contractors that do good work, they have to go for pre-qualification with the district every other year at a minimum. So that's the moment we looked, how did they do on the last 2 years if they haven't submitted for an increase prior to that. And oftentimes, many of our smaller firms or companies do just that. They'll do a handful and they'll request an increase to their bond limitation with us directly. And then we're able to evaluate, yes, they did well on those, and then we'll continue to grow that with them.
And if they do well, does the district, let's say, give that owner a letter, like a recommendation, for they can take it and present it to the Nevada Contractors Board so they can increase their bond and continue doing business with us?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Mr. Chesnick might be able to correct me, but I don't think our pre-qualification limit has hardly ever been the barrier to the Nevada General Contractors Association nor their bond rating. Oftentimes those metrics are much higher. We take a more conservative approach because we want highly qualified people that can execute the work quickly and safely around our students and staff. So we've always been kind of the slow lag within that, but we at least, if they're pre-qualified for us, yes, we will issue a customary letter saying you're pre-approved for X amount with the school district. And they can take that and utilize it however they see fit.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering my question. Great presentation, by the way.
Are there any other questions from the board pertaining to 2.05? Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, just more of a comment. So I, like Mr. McLaughlin was saying, I was very involved with witnessing a lot of the redesign of the designing of the schools, the budgeting of the schools, the blowing of the budget of the schools when things start to escalate. And so around 2021 is when I threw myself into the mix of just wanting to be involved with staff to really witness the process procedures of how schools were designed, built, afforded. When I did that, I really entered as a cynic, or really entered as a critic, just wanting to make sure that the processes wouldn't result in the same schools, just cheaper. So basically getting the public a lot less for more, and that was my big concern. So as I started going through and witnessing the processes and sitting in the interviews for the CMAR interviews, understanding the concerns and the questions that staff had, witnessing the design meetings that were held, and being part of seeing the contractors being involved with the architects, with the owner in the same room, making quick decisions. I think in that process I learned a lot. So about 20 years ago, I used to actually work on a lot of the prototypes. I used to draw up for JMA Architects or Carpenter Sellers or things like that. And what I learned was, a lot of these things get corrected in the next prototypes. This process helped gain my trust and faith in the process that the staff has been leading, bringing new delivery methods such as the CMAR process. I think in result, we're seeing that we're getting a lot more with less. So I think this was a good opportunity that we had, and it is exciting to see all these people, pushing together, collaborating, planning, and finding out, how can we do a lot more with less. And I think that was achieved. So thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from the board here? Go ahead, Gina.
Hi, Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. Thank you both for this presentation. And also thank you, Mr. DeFalco, for actually requesting this physical presentation. Much of this conversation is stuff that has been part of reviewing those project costs, but to see it laid out like this in such a specific way, I think not only helps us, but helps the public kind of understand why they're seeing some of these ginormous numbers coming through on our project reports. So thanks all around. Yay. Mutual Appreciation Society. Now, but you mentioned a couple of things. So one on that sort of, you mentioned like a warehouse or storage of materials. How often are you able to purchase materials for multiple projects at once? Is that something that is happening where you sort of create like a bank of materials that can be utilized from one project to the other in an attempt to save costs, or do we really not have the storage or capacity to kind of blend projects that way?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. We certainly explored that during the time. We looked at a lot of creative ways to unitize some of those products and then landing them here on site. But yeah, there is limitations about, because different contractors had different, or different projects had different contractors that were awarded or yet to be awarded yet. So it would be tough. And then the one that we looked into electrical for a hot minute, and that was then who owns, the district is purchasing the equipment, but then we're not purchasing the warranty attached to it. And so it just became a very tight mess that we necessarily didn't want to enter into, because we wanted to ultimately have somebody responsible for the electrical equipment or any other myriad of warrantable product, that we just didn't want to waive that provision for 20 years just because we're having some tightness now. So, but that was, we certainly explored that. There are certain elements that we've unitized. Some of our security equipment, some of our playground equipment, our asphalt on the modernization side is stuff that, like, we've got unit prices that we establish every 3 to 5 years that we are able to lock that in for a very long time. But that's a lot of times performance of the work, not necessarily the material alone. So yes, and is to answer your question.
Got it. And then, I know that with one of the biggest examples opening very soon, if it hasn't opened already, where we've had this sort of private-public partnership when it comes to St. Jude's Ranch as an example. So CCSD, through Revision 5, committed $5 million to the building of that project. It is soon to be open, now open, it opened soon. Did it open?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. I believe the grand opening is 2 Tuesdays from now.
Oh, great. So that's a project where a relatively small investment from CCSD. Now, this was a complete unique situation, but that is an environment, right, where a public-private partnership led to a kind of decreased overall cost for CCSD when it came to construction to a certain extent. How often are we able to look at that sort of arrangement when it comes to these construction costs?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. So I understand what you're saying about public-private partnerships as an opportunity. St. Jude was by definition a traditional design bid build methodology, though. I think the spirit in which that project was crafted was very collaborative, and maybe the partnership between a public entity and a private entity, which was successful, which I would encourage more, say, municipal agencies to agencies collaborating, like us with Clark County, us with City of Las Vegas, all of our municipal partners. But I think public-private partnerships as a delivery method has not been widely adopted in public sector yet, but it does certainly has some opportunities. I don't know if Mr. Peterson wants to elaborate. So.
Well, then you actually touched on kind of the second part of that question, which is that collaboration with other municipalities. And sort of the same question with that storage. What are the benefits, or have you seen any from collaboration of either materials or construction cost when working with other municipalities? Or has it extended to actual savings, or has it been more just a collaborative effort?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record, I'd say probably nothing to exactly point to with a cost reduction element to it. Probably the most successful demonstration that I've seen throughout the few years has been, a lot of our schools are open schools, open parks agreements, which date back to the 60s, where we basically kept the lights on, kept the gate unlocked for community to use some of our sports fields at elementary, middle, and high schools at certain designated locations with multiple agencies. So we did go down a collaborative path of them. Hey, we're flipping these schools, building on the field and replacing back. So we were able to reduce some costs, and like, hey, you don't need to put back the lights that we did 25 years ago because we don't program it, or you don't need to do the concession stand that we built back in the mid 80s because we haven't opened it in the last 15 years. So there were some minor things we were able to reduce as a result of it, but nothing I can specifically think to and point to a dollar figure today.
If I may, Justin Peterson for the record, one significant process that developed coming out of the pandemic was due to the backlog at the manufacturers around the nation and around the world. There was lead times became very problematic for all construction projects around the world. And so one opportunity that the school district was able to take, CCSD was able to take advantage of, was preparing early procurement packages for materials. And so that did two things. It helped alleviate and reduce some of the risk associated with the long lead items. And it also locked in pricing earlier that was wildly fluctuating. And so that process, and I believe that might still be happening on some projects today, is an opportunity to lock in material and equipment pricing earlier for savings.
Great, thank you. And then my last question is, so how long does it take for those year-over-year changes to kind of impact that cumulative? I mean, this kind of is a tag along to Chad's question, but like, I mean, year over year, we're seeing it has gone down in terms of length of percentage, but just like inflation going, yeah, it's not 10% anymore, but if it may be 2%, it's still growing. Like, are we still going to see that cumulative grow, or is the fact that year over year has tapered off, we'll actually see some of that cumulative come down? And how long does that arc usually take to perceive?
Justin Peterson for the record, and we can join answer this question. All the work in the program is competitively bid, whether it's during design, bid, build delivery method or the CMAR delivery method. It's all competitively bid, every part of it. So the marketplace dictates, and the competitiveness of the marketplace reveals those pricing savings or increases, whatever they may be, very immediately.
Thank you both.
Okay, do we have any other questions pertaining to this agenda item from the board? Anybody virtually have any questions pertaining to this agenda item?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goins. I do have one question, Mr. Peterson. When I see the labor costs, which is dictated through prevailing wage annually, which is like you showed anywhere from the 3 to 4%. What are the factors involved when you put 21% when it comes to factors? Because that's where I'm a little confused. How it goes from prevailing wage standards to the 21% that you report on there. What are the factors involved to make it the 21%? When it comes to labor, strictly labor costs.
I'm sorry. Could you reword the question, maybe just a little bit more?
I think it's on page 11 where it shows the annual prevailing wage. The COLA costs are anywhere from 3 to 5% annually. So,
Yes.
And that's dictated by prevailing wage with the state. But you put 21% when it costs for the cost of labor that have increased in the past few years. So I'm trying to figure out what did I miss, or what are the
I'm sorry.
factors?
In this particular chart, the 21% is cumulative from 2019 to 2024.
Okay, so you're adding the
So if you divide up 5 years into 21, you've got roughly
I
4%.
get you. Okay, that makes more sense to me. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think if you, like Clark County's prevailing wage rates, if you look at those through the years, there's probably an average of pretty close to 3% to 3.5%.
Yes,
As an
thank you.
average.
I'd agree with that, yeah. And that's a survey that comes out every 2 years. But the COLAs are adjusted annually with the state. So,
Yeah.
thank you again, Mr. Peterson. Are there any other questions for Mr. Peterson or Mr. McLaughlin pertaining to this? I think we're good. We're going to finally move, any public comment pertaining to 2.05? Seeing none, moving forward to 2.06, Bond Oversight Committee bylaw reviews. Okay, I guess this is the time where everyone can speak their minds. So, go ahead, Byron, do you want to say something? Or somebody else virtually? Go ahead, Lola.
I don't actually have anything to add.
I'm sorry.
I don't have anything to add. I appreciate everybody working on this, and I'm just going to listen to the feedback.
Great, thank you, Lola. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Thank you. I'll take my hand down. I just want to apologize that I have not been able to participate in your previous meeting related to the bylaws, dealing with my own personal crisis, but I've had a chance to look at it, and I have to say I'm was very surprised when I saw the first copy. We've gone from a 4-page bylaws to today it's 22 pages. And I'm pretty surprised by the content of a lot of it. Some of it I agree with, like, for example, the liaisons. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, you'll give me a little leeway on my comments. I know others have already commented on the bylaws, but I have not, so I've kind of lumped mine all together. Is that okay with you? I'm asking for permission first.
Give me a second here, just a second.
You've introduced the item in.
Are we having a sidebar conversation? I can't hear, and I'd like to know what the
Ms.
conversation
Williams,
is.
I'm asking legal if we have to have public comment before we discuss this issue as a board. That's the only
Oh.
question. Thank you.
Consistent with the Board of Trustees procedures, now that you've introduced the item, if you want to proceed with public comment before your discussion, that's fine. It's-
Okay, Ms. Williams, legal has advised that I can give public comment before
Yeah.
the board
Yeah, no
discusses.
problem. I heard that, Mr. Chairman. I heard that. So I'll wait for your instruction.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. So then I will reach out. Is there any public comment when it comes to the review of these bylaws at this point? I do have some cards here, some. Okay. I do have three different people that would like to speak on the bylaw reviews. Mr. Fred Smith, you have 3 minutes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. I know that y'all have seen me out of the audience before at previous meetings, but with a couple of notable exceptions, I doubt if any of you know who I am or even my name. But my name is Fred Smith. From 1991 to 2007, I basically held Mr. McLaughlin's position within the Clark County School District. During that time, the district grew from 130,000 students to over 300,000 students. We built 180 new schools, over 100 additions, and I don't know how many thousands of rehab and modernization projects. After I retired from the district in 2007, I worked for a couple of years in Los Angeles as the chief facilities executive for new school construction for the Los Angeles Unified School District, a $12.6 billion program. During my 16 years with the district, I attended all of the Bond Oversight Committee meetings. Since I came back to Las Vegas in 2010, I've attended either virtually or in person most of the meetings here, and I've never said a word until today. I am concerned with this item that the board is contemplating, and you're being asked to consider, some rather significant changes to the bylaws without having any historical reference as to how many of these items came to be or why they exist. And the primary example that I will zero in on today is this concept of liaisons. As you know, the Bond Oversight Committee, as an advisory committee to the Board of School Trustees, is also subject to the open meeting law. Very early on, the Bond Oversight Committee, by the way, was formed right after the passage of the 1988 bond program. And from the very beginning, those 15 members of that Bond Oversight Committee realized that they could not delve into the nuts and bolts of how this program was set up, how it operated, without direct contact with the staff. And they could not do it as a committee of 15 people. The first concept that was discussed was one of subcommittees, a subcommittee of 2 or 3 people to look into design, to look into construction, to look into public administration, to look into finance. Unfortunately, the public meeting laws and the interpretation of the public meeting law said that those subcommittees would have to be subject to the open meeting law as well, and that was not going to work. And that's where the concept of liaisons came to be. And as you just heard earlier today from Mr. Gertis and how that liaison concept has worked in terms of reviewing designs, construction, prototypes, finances, it has worked exceedingly well. My concern is if you throw that out, you're not going to be able to do your job as a bond oversight committee by having all 15 11 or however many members you wind up with, and I know my time is running out. I'm just going to say in closing before other people speak, you have some people in the community that are resources. Ask us questions as to how things came to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We will have Ms. Joyce Halderman. Good, Joyce. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm glad to be here today. I am Joyce Haldeman, and I was a parent in 1988 who worked on the passage of the bond that the ballot question that gave permission to build schools construction. It was a hard-fought bond. My relationship with David Flatt and with Yvette Williams, I wish he were here today so I could give her a hug, goes back to those days when we worked on campaigns together. Brian Cram appointed me to be a member of the Bond Oversight Committee in 1988. I was the superintendent's liaison for BOC and served in that capacity until 2015. In 1992, I was hired by the district, and my chief responsibility was community and government relations, with a focus on making sure we could pass bond campaigns so that we could continue to fund school construction. I listened to the meeting of your last month's meeting, was disappointed to hear the comment that this committee has always been a bit of a mess. And I want you to know I take exception with that. I applaud you for your work. I know how much work it takes. It's not just the time that you spend here in this meeting, it's the time that you spend being a liaison and doing the research and making sure that you are aware of what's going on. As a member of the public and general public, when we go before the voters for approval, they depend upon you. You are our eyes and ears. We don't have time to do all the things that you're doing. We trust that you're going to do a good job for us. Credibility of school districts as an institution, credibility of elected officials such as the Board of Trustees, always has been a jeopardized situation. There always has to be a research body like yourself that provides the insight, that answers the questions, asks the questions, that probes into things, so that we as voters have confidence that this organization, this Board of Trustees, will spend the money correctly. It's a blessing that you don't have to keep going out for bonds. I will tell you, it was getting to be a very difficult task for us to pass bond after bond after bond. But in 2015, when the legislation was passed that allowed the ongoing funding of the existing tax rate to pay for school construction and school renovation, there were a couple of things that I personally testified to before the legislature that helped make that possible. Number one is that the number one backstop is that you have an elected Board of Trustees, and the buck stops there. If things go wrong, they're the ones who are supposed to be responsible. Number two, there is a legislatively appointed debt management commission with representation from all the local entities that also provides a backstop. But the most important critical part was the Bond Oversight Committee, who on a daily basis is looking and having conversations with staff members, working with all of the people in the community who are supporting the bond issue through the construction program, that you are the ones who are making sure things are working correctly. You're asking the questions. Sometimes it's uncomfortable for staff. I sometimes was on that end because I became an employee during the course of my service as a Bond Oversight Committee member, still served as the superintendent's appointee until I retired in 2015. So sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes we didn't really like all the questions, but guess what? That's what kept us honest. That's what keeps us going. I hope that if, in fact, there is going to be a change to the bylaws of the BOC, that you look into having an expert in the open meeting law weigh in. I am not convinced that liaisons violates the open meeting law, and I would encourage you to keep that in place. It's an essential part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Debbie Earl Scheller? Sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Go ahead.
No, it's just Debbie Earl.
Oh, Debbie Earl, okay.
And I remember some of you guys. I served on the Bond Oversight from September 2004 till June 2022, so for about 18 years. I just wanted to speak to the revision of the bylaws, specifically to the elimination of the liaison representatives. While I was on BOC, I found them very necessary and highly valuable. If necessary, in between meetings, I participated as a liaison. I remember Alfonso, we went to a couple of meetings together. And they would meet with staff regarding upcoming agenda items and provide a report to us at the meeting along with the agenda item as it was presented. We relied on their expertise in their particular field and trusted their judgment, just as the trustees do when in their vetting process, because I was looking through the bylaws, and with their appointments for the non-voting members, there's an online application, there's a resume, the non-voting members get to make a recommendation, and then the board gets to look at all the applications, and then the voting members of the board have a final approval. So there's quite a vetting process to make sure you get some good experts. We were not experts on everything that came before us. We just couldn't be. I want to make clear that their report or statements did not take the place of the presentation or us asking questions. Those full presentations were still given. They could just provide us insight and let us know questions that were asked and things that were talked about that we wouldn't have thought of, because I'm just not an expert in that field. So they were incredibly valuable as far as I was concerned. I know that I was surprised to hear that there was some conversation that this violated the open meeting law somehow, because I will tell you that we worked with in-house counsel to make sure that that did not happen. And we were very careful in the wording and how it was presented to make sure that that didn't happen. So I'm not quite certain what's going on there. But I will say that I am confident that they don't, unless something drastic has changed, that they do not violate, these liaisons do not violate the open meeting law. I will say that I just would urge you that because of the role and the advisory that they give us, and I will tell you, I mean, do you mind if I just mention, I think I got a little bit of time, some of the people that have been these experts on bond oversight. I mean, we have Bob Broadbent, Doug Carson, Jim Gibson, Leland Pace, Tito Taberti, Don Snyder, Virginia Valentine. I mean, we had some great people on bond oversight, and you guys as well in your fields that gave us insight. So I would urge you not to do away with these liaisons. Let them be valuable to you. And I think that as far as credibility to the public and everything else, when you've got that additional information coming to you, we also found that our meetings were going way, way too long, like sometimes 4 hours, and we would lose our quorums. So that was another way these liaisons became very valuable to us, because they could sort of cut to the chase and tell us what the real issues were. So again, I would urge you to perhaps not do away with those liaisons. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Just on a personal level, I really appreciate the 3 witnesses that came up. There's a lot of time that you guys put in. You dedicated a lot of your lives, and this board obviously meant a lot to you, and it continues to mean a lot to you. And I was down the middle about this liaison deal, and after hearing you guys helped me make my mind. I think the value of it should stay in place, and that'll be my personal recommendation when that time comes. Okay, since there's no other public comment, we will now move on to board members. Any comment when it pertains to bylaw changes?
I think we should go to Member Williams, but I'm ready after that.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Yvette. You had the floor.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to thank the public comments today. Have had the privilege of working with some of you, both on the Bond Oversight Committee, on fighting to get the bond, getting the bond renewed over the years. And so I just appreciate you all coming out and still being engaged. We certainly still need your participation and engagement in your voice. So thank you for coming out today. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, Joyce, to get that hug. But with that, a few things I wanted to mention. I was stating earlier, and I'll just restate that I felt like the new proposed bylaws were overextensive, far overreaching, very restrictive. I have major concerns around transparency and accountability. And I also feel that these proposed bylaws really foster a lack of independence and a dependence on individuals and possibly individuals' agendas. A couple of things that I wanted to just highlight was I can skip that on the 4 members. That's not a big deal to me. I noticed in section 8, all around misconduct and inappropriate behavior, I felt, why do we have 1.5 pages around regulating individuals on the committee? 1.5 pages. It seems like an overkill, totally unnecessary, and it seems very subjective even, and how a person would be ruled as being inappropriate and possibly even removed from the bond oversight committee. Also, in section 9, we do not have a nominating procedure. So we've got down our executive board, how we're going to elect them, but we don't have a nominating procedure. I'd like to see a nominating procedure in there. And also, I'd like to see, it says that no one member on the executive committee can serve more than 3 consecutive terms in the same position. And I'd like to expand that where no one member of the executive board could serve more than 6 consecutive terms combined. I think we need to make sure that we are allowing other members of the committee to step up and give them the opportunity to serve in leadership roles. I think that makes us stronger as a body. Section 3 seems very limiting and restrictive. If our role is to actually advise, then the trustees who have appointed us should trust us enough to decide what information and from what experts we need to hear from. This is very controlling, in my opinion, and it can become an individual agenda, again, limiting what we can and cannot hear from, what experts we can call to ask to help us in making decisions, and then also limiting that decision to one liaison. In my opinion, this should go before the board if it becomes that kind of an issue, and make the board aware of our why. If the committee, of course, approved to hear from this person, then the board should hear why we wanted to hear from the person, what our reasoning for doing that, and allow the board to make that decision and not any one individual. My other concern was in Article 5, Section 2. I've served on many, many boards. I've served as chair of many boards, and I've never seen an organization where the chair did not decide the agenda, but someone else did. This is really egregious, in my opinion. And as we are an independent body from the trustees, the chair should be making the decision and setting the agenda and coordinating it with the CCSD assigned facilitator. And then the restriction of a master calendar. I can see us trying to do a master calendar. I'm not opposed to a master calendar with staff's input because, staff is running the operation. So they know, kind of what's going to come before us. So I'm not opposed to that. But it's impossible for us to try to set a master agenda and then make it so ridiculously difficult to try to adjust that agenda when we're running such a fluid operation. I mean, things are changing consistently all the time. So I think that really needs to be addressed there. And then the trustee, regarding bylaws changes. In my opinion, that should not be the liaison making the decision whether we change a bylaws, but it should be the board of the school trustees making that decision if they want to change our bylaws. I don't feel that we should give that kind of power to one individual. I think the liaison, the trustee liaison is a representative of her body or his body as well, and should be representing that body. And so that decision should be coming from that body as we do with our chair. Almost done. If you just give me a liberty, can we get more restrictive as it relates to liaison represents the board and not themselves on their opinion? Where am I at? Oh, section 3. Oh no, that was part of the agenda again. I think I already discussed that was in the agenda planning, so I don't have to elaborate on that. And then let's see, one last thing. No, I think that was it. So with that all said, I believe that, and as much as I've been pushing for these bylaws changes, I feel like the approach that we're taking in this is a rush. I feel that we have a new board coming on in January. The Board of Trustees made the decision to hold off on appointing a trustee until January. I believe in the spirit of that, to align ourselves with the Board of Trustees, is to hold off and table any kind of a vote on the bylaws until after the new board is brought on and a new liaison appointed, so that that new liaison could be part of this discussion as well as the new trustees. So I would like to make a motion that we table this item for any kind of a vote until after February of 2025.
I second Matthew DeFalco for the record.
Legal, should the board have the opportunity to discuss everything before we get to a motion and try to
Well,
postpone
we
this
can
thing?
we can still discuss it, but the motion's been made, but we can still discuss it. I'm not opposed to a discussion. I'm just saying any votes should be held off until after our new board.
All right, if I heard Sammy Randolph for the record, if I heard Member Williams correctly, her motion was to table the vote on the item, and you received a
Correct.
second, so you've now got to address that motion. But it was limited to the vote as opposed
Correct.
to discussion of the item.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
All right, then I do have a motion on the floor to table this to February 2025 to make any changes to the bylaws once the newly elected trustees are in place. And we have a second from Mr. DeFalco. Is there any discussion on this motion by the other board members? Go ahead, Chad.
And this is a comment, maybe a question for Member Williams. Is this delay in a vote the direction or feedback that you feel is from the Board of Trustees?
I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Board of Trustees or any particular Board of Trustees, but I feel that transparency and accountability, it's in our interest of this independent body, the Bond Oversight Committee, that is charged with transparency, providing advice, and accountability, oversight, that is in our interest as appointees of the Bond Oversight Committee to allow the new incoming board, along with those board members who will continue their service, to participate in formulating these bylaws. I feel that it's not been inclusive.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions pertaining to Ms. Williams? First,
I guess,
go ahead.
so,
Go
sorry,
ahead,
just to
Chad.
finish my comment. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Yvette, for the clarification. I think my comment is unless there's something that I'm missing, I don't think we have a lame duck Board of Trustees at this point. So I don't understand the 5-month delay in like taking action on what what we feel changes should be to our committee's bylaws. And the reason I say that is that, like, ultimately, this is my understanding is this is the decision of the Board of Trustees to either take action, make a change, or not. And all we're doing is recommending or advising what we think is the best course of action. If they don't want to take action, don't choose to take action, I think that's out of our hands. But I think delaying for 5 months our committee's ability to make our recommendation, I disagree with. Thank you.
Chad, let me just clarify too. The new incoming Board of Trustees, I anticipate, will make a lot of changes. Their priorities are going to change. Governance model might change. Their needs might change, including what they expect and what they may want from this Bond Oversight Committee. So we pass these bylaws, and then they no longer comply with these new changes and new policies that this new board has adopted. So we're back where we started. It just seems to me that we're getting out front here a little bit, considering the amount of changes. This is not a simple bylaw revision. We're talking about a complete overhaul of how the bond oversight actually functions. And I think there's some unintended consequences as a result of it in looking at it. That's my opinion. And it would be a 4-month delay. It's already almost November, so we're talking December, January, February, we could bring it back forward. Their new trustees are sworn in January, first week of January.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Go ahead, Robert.
Rob Gertison for the record. I don't mind belaying the decision on that vote. I think also we should really consider our forefathers and mothers that presented, because I know there's a lot of decisions that were made at that time that we should also just really listen to and respect. So, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Go ahead, Gina.
Matthew DeFalco for the record. I do have prepared remarks. Maybe I'll just make them. Our collective responsibility is to ensure that we remain a strong oversight body, one that holds the district accountable, fosters transparency, and remains a bridge between the public and the work being done. That said, with any changes to our structure, I think it's essential that we carefully consider how these adjustments might impact our ability to fulfill this role effectively. With that in mind, I'd like to walk through a few key areas of concern that I believe we need to be mindful of as we move forward. Number one, I think there's a potential limiting of our oversight scope in these bylaw recommendations. In terms of limiting staff interaction, there's a clause that emphasizes committee members adhering to a limited scope of their role and avoiding distracting staff from their priorities in Article 4, Section 3. I think this could constrain the committee's ability to request detailed or additional information from staff, which is essential for effective oversight. Issue number 2, in terms of public engagement, reduced interaction with the public. The bylaws mention limiting committee members from commenting on public forums or media in Article 4, Section 2, which may restrict transparency and communication with the public. A strong oversight body should be able to communicate openly and frequently to maintain public trust. Also, in terms of public engagement as an issue, meeting schedule restrictions. All meetings are going to be required to be deterring staff work hours, which is how we're essentially operating now, but I believe this would limit participation from community members or stakeholders who may only be available after traditional work hours. That's in Article 5, Section 1. Issue number 3, agenda control and restriction on committee activities. Agenda setting constraints, which I've already heard about being discussed. I think this process for setting agendas gives significant control where it shouldn't be in Article 5, Section 2. If committee members feel an important topic should be discussed but is denied, there are limited avenues to force its inclusion. In the issue of political neutrality that's discussed in these bylaws recommendations, there are strict provisions that prohibit committee members from discussing political candidates, parties, or personal agendas in meetings in Article 3, Section 7. While that is important for neutrality, I have concerns about how this provision could limit discussions on policies or proposals that have political implications. Issue number 4, accountability and enforcement. I believe that there's a vague enforcement of misconduct policies here. Although the bylaws address misconduct in Article 3, Section 7, the consequences are not clearly defined, and the process is somewhat bureaucratic. If a member repeatedly violates bylaws or fails to meet expectations, it could take time for corrective actions to be implemented, allowing dysfunction to persist. Also, attendance requirements, enforcements. This committee has procedures for handling absenteeism, which is outlined in Article 3, Section 6, but the process involves several layers of intervention before removal is considered. This could allow for ongoing absenteeism, which might hinder the committee's ability to reach quorum or make important decisions. And issue number 5, transparency. Information flow controlled by the chair and the staff. The ability to control the flow of information between the committee, the public, and the board is concentrated in Article 5, Section 2. If these gatekeepers do not prioritize transparency, it could weaken the committee's ability to inform the public about important issues related to bond funding and the capital improvement plan. Also, limitations on third-party input I have an issue with. The bylaws state that requests for additional training or third-party information must go through a formal approval process in Article 4, Section 3, which could delay or prevent the committee from obtaining external expert opinions or data that could enhance its ability to oversee district projects. In summary, while the proposed changes include some protections for committee functioning, they also introduce several areas where oversight could be weakened through limited scope, reduced transparency, and procedural hurdles. These are critical issues to address that the committee is to maintain its strong oversight role, ensure accountability to the public, and provide a check on the district. And I also want to add that I'm grateful for the people on this committee who have been working through the changes. I know that you have good intentions to try to do the right thing and to strengthen this committee, but I have serious concerns about the direction we're going.
Thank you, Matt.
This is council. I just want to remind you, you still need to deal with the motion that was made and has been seconded about
Yeah, we're in
tabling the
discussion.
vote. Well, some of the comments are going to the merits of the bylaws themselves, whereas the motion was limited to tabling the vote.
Question and yeah. Is there any more questions or comment pertaining to the motion that's been presented?
So at this point, we're not supposed to be talking about the bylaws themselves. We're supposed to be talking about the wisdom of postponing the vote.
Correct.
My apologies. Go ahead, Gina, if you want to say something.
This is Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. Well, then I'm kind of disappointed that the motion to table kind of precludes then our ability to actually have the discussion for which I think we were here today on. So, I mean, in the interest of wanting to be able to have a greater conversation on this, I guess I for that reason, I would at this time, we would have a discussion towards voting against tabling, but it's already given the late hour. I do have concerns that tabling it so long when we're talking about the governance documents of the Board of Trustees versus and how long what we're talking about is having to respond to them changing their governance. So I don't think it's actually realistic to be able to have this conversation in February when the changes would have to wait until we have the updated governance documents from the Board of Trustees versus the just them being sat. That alone is not enough. Both our current bylaws and this version have a pretty robust mechanism for making further bylaw revisions. And my only other concern about precluding conversation is that whether it's likely or not, there is the fact of the matter that the Board of Trustees could choose to pass this regardless of our input. Not that I think they would, but I think we sort of relinquish our ability to show an ability to have a conversation about this and actually find a way to have an agreement. So I guess when it comes to the motion to table, I just think it's unfortunate that any tabling would sort of keep us from being able to have this conversation as we move forward.
Sammy Randolph for the record. This goes back to the language of the original motion, which was to table the vote. She did not, what I heard was not to table the item, meaning tabling the item would close discussion, which you have continued to do. The motion was limited to tabling the vote. So I did not want that to be interpreted as I was somehow suggesting you can't discuss the item.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, then I don't understand the admonition of getting into the merits of talking about the item.
It's on the agenda. It was an action item, but also a discussion item. You can choose not to take action, but still discuss.
So since there's a motion on the table and a second to strictly discuss accepting this or comment on the motion itself, do we not have to just stick to the motion for discussion purposes? That's where I'm a little confused.
So this motion would mean that until February, we would not be able to have a vote on this, regardless of conversation or discussion. If this motion passes, we would not be able to vote on the board, any sort of bylaws until at minimum February. Is that your interpretation?
That's how I understand it.
Yes, that's my interpretation, that it would be tabled as an action item until your next meeting. However,
Until our next meeting or until February?
I don't believe a date was specified in the original motion.
It was.
February was given a table
Okay,
to.
all right.
So if there's no other discussion, I think we're kind of going in circles here, but let's get a vote from the board. If you want to vote, if you're in favor of the motion that's been presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Well, Mr. Chairman, is there any other discussion around tabling the vote? I think is what I think Gina was trying to get to. I don't want to speak for you, Gina.
I think I understand what she's saying is basically the motion on the floor is to table the vote until February.
Yes.
And so.
Yes, because I
Right.
don't want to have to redo this process again.
Right. I think I understand. Tabling
Yeah,
the vote
but-
until
but
February,
yes.
meaning that we
Yes,
would not
but
be able to
I'm
vote.
not trying to delay any discussion because we could get a lot of work done in discussion.
But we cannot vote on it until February regardless of the outcome of those discussions.
Correct. In fairness to, I think, our committee, I think it's the fair thing to do.
Just quick.
Go ahead, Mr. Goins.
So Yvette, you're saying we'd have to do this all again? Is that what I'm hearing you're saying? If
If the new board comes in January, they change their governance model. I'm just talking hypothetically. Let's say they change their governance model. Some of those procedures and policy that these bylaws attach to, that is why our liaison, our trustee liaison, put them into the bylaw because she said we weren't in compliance. That could all change. We could have a whole new policies and procedures. So what I'm saying is, I think we're putting the cart before the horse, is what I'm trying to say. I think we should, I agree with Gina and the rest of you that feel, Chad, and the rest of you that feel that we should come forward with some recommendations. We can come forward with our recommendations after the new board is there, but they would then be able to say, well, you know what? We know that this is going to be discussed. We know this is something we want to look at. So let's get our governance together, and then we can then proceed with our bylaws, because we might have to make some more adjustments.
Okay, do you got clarity there, Mr. Goins?
I do.
Okay, is there any more comments or discussion pertaining to the motion we have? Okay, this is going to be hard to figure out who's voting which way because I heard too much ayes and too much nays, so let's do a roll call vote. Any of those, Ms. Williams, are you in favor of your motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Mr. Goins?
I am not.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson? Not here. You are on mute, sir. What is your vote? Would you like, do you understand the question that's on the floor for you to vote for? You're on mute, sir. Can't hear your voice.
I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm gonna vote no.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Platt.
I'll vote yes.
Mr. DeFalco.
Yes.
Mr. Conrad.
No.
Ms. Gina Blackman-Taylor.
No.
Mr. Gertison. Are there any other members that haven't voted? Oh, Mr. Camejo, I'm sorry.
I'm going to vote yes.
Well, I'm not sure if I get a vote as a chair. Do I get a vote?
Yes.
My vote would be no. So we're at an impasse. So legal, where do we go from here?
My count was 5-5, which means you took no action on the motion.
Okay, since the motion does not make the votes required to pass, no action will be taken. It fails. Correct?
Chair, can we get a recount? Because I was trying to just keep tallying. I got a 6-5.
It's 5-5. There were a total of 10
Okay.
people that voted,
Just making sure.
and I got 5-5. Legal got 5-5 as well. I counted 5-5, so.
Hello?
Mr. Goins, you said so? No, he's talking to somebody else.
From where?
Okay, then apparently the motion fails at a 5-5, correct? Legal? Thank you.
Remove me from your number.
Byron, you mute your mic, please. All right, since the motion has failed at this point, then I think we can proceed with discussion, since there's no action to put this off till February. So back open. Anybody wants to say anything? I'll just say right off the bat that the liaisons, in my opinion, needs to stay. I think from what we've heard from people that have been here in the past, people that have been on the board for 18 years, and all the experience we just got from the witnesses, I think the liaisons is key to keep in place. And I will leave it open to whoever wants to speak next. Good. Byron? No? Okay.
Yes,
Well,
go ahead.
did you want to say anything? We're back to discussion since the
No,
motion
I'm
failed.
good.
Okay, thank you, Byron.
Chair, I would
Go
like
ahead,
to
Abram.
continue the discussion and continue working on the document, but have, as February, have that as a date to present the completed document so that way we're not rushing the bylaws, so that way we're not gonna, so we can continue having the discussion, but then have a February, I guess, a vote, or, just trying to buy more time, not trying to create the bylaws today, because there's many things that should stay and we should discuss it, but, I just think we should maybe have the discussion in multiple meetings leading up to like January or February, and then present it to the new board as a recommendation, and then that way the new board can vote for it, because I do agree with Ms. Williams that there might be a lot of changes coming after the New Year's.
I think we're going to be discussing this as a board for probably the next 2 or 3 months, because there's a lot of things that we're not agreed on. And we're not going to present anything to the trustees as a board until we do get complete agreement. So putting a date on it, I'm not for that until we get all these details worked out. Whatever time it takes, it takes. But I don't think it's fair to anybody on the board to present anything to the trustees that we are not in total agreement on. And sounds like there's plenty that we're not on the same page with. Plenty here to discuss for the next few months from hearing everything that Ms. Williams talked about. And hopefully we can have discussions to try to work these kinks out. But it sounds like there's plenty out here that need to be worked out, and I do not see it being done today or the next month or so. So if anybody else wants to comment on this topic, the floor is yours.
Matthew DeFalco for the record. I just want to say that I don't think our approach is working. This last time we left the meeting talking about wanting to work together more, and I didn't see this document or hear it or get any phone calls or anything about it the entire month. So I think we need to revamp how we're including more people's input in this document if we're going to keep working. And I'd love to hear from Member Goins a little bit, if he's available to speak on some of the things that he cares about, because I don't think I've heard anything from him in particular yet.
Byron?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I am still deciphering through it with all the changes. So I'm not really prepared this time to delve into it in detail. That's why I didn't want to go for that vote. I think we, as a committee, need to continue our discussion until we come to some type of agreement on it. That's just my comments at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Goins. Is there any other comment pertaining to this?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Yvette.
Okay, thank you. I just want to, I'm not sure what the process has been in the past because I haven't gotten any kind of communication as to what is there a procedure in place that you'd like us to follow, Mr. Chairman, in providing our input on our suggestions or recommendations? Should we send you an email with that? Would that be helpful in furthering the conversation?
Yeah, I think that's going to play key because the executive board, myself, Gina, and Chad, we worked, especially more Gina. I can't take as much credit as the time she's put into this, but why don't we do that? We get some emails going to where your concerns are put out. We can address them as an executive board here, us three, and come out with some clarity and so whatever changes that need to be done, let's get that worked out.
Mr. Chairman, am I hearing you correct? Are you saying send the email to Gina? Because we can't do to the whole group because of the violate meeting law. So
I'm
are
sorry,
you
Ms.
suggesting
Williams.
that me as an individual will send my email to Gina or to
Send the
you?
emails to myself, the chair.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. And it's very important, everyone, that we only respond that email just to that one person. We can't do group email in that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, for helping me clarify that.
Can we discuss with individual board members? Okay, it all has to be done in the email
We're all
to the
looking
chair.
down at legal.
I'm actually confused about some of these questions myself because every time I want to discuss something with somebody, I'm told that I'm breaking open meeting law, so floor is all yours, legal.
Yeah, they want you to discuss in public.
Correct, yes.
On the record.
That's correct, yeah. Go ahead.
Sammy Randolph for the record, and that was going to be my recommendation, that you communicate with the chair directly, expressing your concerns or something you would like to see added, but the actual discussion needs to take place in public.
Thank you, legal. Go ahead, Gina.
This is Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. I too want to thank all of the historical wisdom that was shared, and to thank you for taking the time to come, because if you didn't have to be in these meetings, it's a long time to sit and to give background, because I think some things as they have been communicated have also just in a regular game of telephone have gotten a little bit skewed. I'm not saying that we're going to pass this today or that we need to pass this today, but I think the background for, similarly to getting a historical perspective, the background for the reasonings behind some of these changes are also important to note. Is that, so in terms of the liaison roles, my understanding from legal and from the liaison, Board of Trustees liaison, is that it's not an open meeting law violation as much as it is a violation of board committee policies GP 14 and GP 15 on how committee members are allowed to interact with staff. Now, that being said, of course, any new Board of Trustees can come in and alter GP 14 and GP 15. And the point that I tried to make last year or last meeting was that these bylaws and that governance and even the policies that we're talking about changing are never set in stone. Never. They are set in stone until we have the next bylaw conversation. And so should a future Board of Trustees change the governance policy and change how they approach interactions with staff, there is nothing precluding Bond Oversight Committee from actually changing our bylaws accordingly. Now, one of the things that I do think is particularly noteworthy is a matter of time. We are sitting at 2:02. Everyone has been here for a long time. This is the sort of thing that can happen when we don't have the sort of, when, it's the challenge of public open meeting law. But I also, one of the things that I thought about as we were between months was the legal advice from last month, where they were talking about the staff has absolutely any right to form groups to work on projects, and without it being a violation of open meeting law, and it allows for that opportunity to provide that personal feedback and that connection that can be purposeful and meaningful. I was thinking specifically of the work that Rob and I did on CIP 5, where because that was a working board, that was a working group that was formed by the staff that wanted to include bond oversight committee members. That was a situation in which we were able to have that sort of one-on-one conversation. As in terms of that violation, I don't necessarily think that we need to spend a ton of time on all of these. That's not phrased right. When it comes to liaison roles, I think there is a benefit, and I think there is a lack of transparency potentially, depending on who is in those liaison roles. So we are then relying on the efforts of individual people within the committee, and we are relying on their sort of interactions with staff versus, like I said, a design issue where perhaps Rob is brought in individually to kind of talk about design, but a design prototype, from what I understand policy to be, that should be a conversation that can happen to the full, in front of the full committee, and we haven't had that. So I think in some ways there are aspects of this that are attempting to actually increase public transparency, with also understanding, as in the case of finance, that there are issues that would need to be handled in the same sort of small, non-quorum forming meetings that are private, like we have done with safety. So to just note some of the changes that had been incorporated from conversation last time, and I've already been making notes, and I hope people continue to talk to Al, because the point of this process isn't to be combative, it is to be collaborative. So new, we had added renewable energy goals combined with equity and diversion goals in that very first point. So that's the first time that our bylaws have explicitly addressed those issues as part of goals. I just want to remind that bylaw revisions and policy recommendations are an ongoing aspect of what we're doing. The contract bidding for general contractors was added as a bullet point in our priorities. Formation of subcommittees and work groups was added as a way to give actually more control over that process than what existed in the previous version. There was a clarification on speaking out. It was very important to me that we preserve our First Amendment rights to talk about issues that are facing this committee, and that are facing the district, and be able to speak as a person. They try and delineate more what we're able to do in our capacity as a Bond Oversight Committee member. And the big part of that was, and maybe that's one area that we'll need to specifically reference, is that aspect of social media outreach was based more on that idea of a deliberating outside of a meeting. So that was guidance that was coming from the Attorney General's office. And then we added back in a more robust public engagement process, which also was something that had been a bit removed. So I have taken extensive notes from the feedback. I hope it continues to come. So I don't want to preclude whatever conversation. I don't have a motion to make at this time, because we put it as an action item to give us the ability to make that decision. I'm not comfortable with making it so that we cannot make the decision until February, which is why I voted no, but I'm also not urging an immediate action on this. I'm just, I want to continue to have this sort of robust conversation about where these issues lie and what sort of language changes we need. But actually, in my opinion, I think there are aspects of it that increase transparency and increase conversation and increase committee engagement, as well as interaction with Board of Trustees that has, that is a bit stronger and more robust than what we had before. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Is there anybody else that wants to speak?
Member, this is Matthew DeFalco. Could you expand on what you think is in these recommendations that increases transparency?
Absolutely. So in the removal of the liaison rule, so part of what we, and this actually addresses your question about that, the agenda. At one, in the monthly agenda, at one point we looked at trying to enumerate what would automatically always be in whatever yearly agenda, and then we found that we were more likely to leave those things off. So as one example is that reports that come in through that sort of monthly process, and we imagine them to be the sort of documents that we already saw with the joint with the push for a quarterly presentation in front of the Board of Trustees. It actually would provide for a more robust presentation of reports and such that we've got that we can elevate at a much more public and higher level without relying on the trustee liaison to do it. So we had situations where in the past, in the 4 years that I've been here, we've had reports on really interesting information regarding workforce development that I'm not sure has actually, how much has actually been seen by the greater general public at a Board of Trustees meeting. I think that we have issues regarding finance. Chad and I have had conversations about the sort of reporting that he sees is largely based on what he thought was appropriate as a finance liaison. There are aspects of that might be better served by having the entire board look at it in a similar non-quorum grouping, the way that we shared non-public information when it came to safety. So things that would be too private to share in a public forum, but that would be shared beyond just a single liaison. And then the other one that I keep bringing up is that, like, Rob's insight into design is really valuable to staff, but that has, at least to date, precluded like necessarily plans or a more robust conversation about design happening in front of this committee. So I believe that the liaison rules do allow, I've been a liaison. I believe that they do allow for that sort of one-on-one communication that can foster relationships. I think there's a mechanism for bringing that information to the committee as a whole that doesn't rely on having just great committee liaisons investigating that information.
Thank you, Gina.
Hey, Al. Abraham
Go
for
ahead,
the record. With everything that's been discussed, I think we should table this conversation and put it in for and put it for our next month's meeting as an agenda, and continue this whole conversation with just this conversation, no other presentations or nothing else on the agenda. That way we have the time to continue this conversation. So if that's okay, I would like to make a motion to do so, to table this and to add it to next month's meeting on the agenda.
Yes, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Abraham Camejo to table this and to discuss further at next month's meeting.
I'll second that, as long as there's not a restriction that there can be no other agenda item.
I have a discussion on that motion.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I'm not going to be here in November. I will be out of the country for a November meeting. And this is so important. I know I'm asking a lot, but it would be great if we could table it until December.
Matthew DeFalco, on that note, what do you think about adding it as a discussion point but not an action item, so that we can have conversations and then come back after that?
And I have every intention of sending my email with my suggestions in writing, so Mr. Chairman can share those with all of you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not another question for anybody that has any concerns, please email me, and then I can bring it in front of Chad and Gina. That way we can discuss them as well.
Okay.
And come out with some clearer answers for everyone at the next meeting. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, comment, please, before we take the vote to table. And maybe it's just unclear to me, but, so bear with me, but I'm a little bit unclear on what we're doing to move this along, and I have some suggestions, but, so, or maybe just a clarification out loud is what I need.
For me, it just seems like we're going to continue this discussion next month as what we're doing right now. There's
Understood, but productively, right? Like I think that's the goal. So, and I don't disagree with the comments of like plan of action, but so I think I'm going to say something similar to what Mr. DeFalco said. I think what would be good, and we'll vote on the motion to table, but I think collecting the threshold issues. You, Al, collecting the threshold issues from the members, consolidating that list, and then bringing that list and the document, as far as I'm concerned, as it stands in its current form, to the next meeting, so that we can work through together each one of those threshold issues, right? So, and in my opinion, if the collective committee says we want to keep liaisons, then we should make that change to this document and keep liaisons in, right? But I think working through those threshold issues together, and we'll need some time, and I don't know about, like, I'm probably not in favor of like restricting any other agenda items, but we probably should make it a priority on the agenda, not the last of, several important things. So that then we can maybe come out of the next month's meeting with a document that we do feel comfortable voting on. Maybe we won't collect, everyone can't get everything they want, but like, we could take a vote on this document right now, and we're all gonna, I would assume we all can take a guess at what the vote's gonna be, right? So I'm just trying to think through, like, how do we get to a document that we will vote in favor of to recommend to the board? That's my thoughts on it.
Gotcha, and that's the point.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Yvette.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a recommendation? I've been in this scenario in other boards. What you could do, and I don't know if you're willing to do it or not, and so I'm not trying to put extra work on you. I know we're all busy. But what you could do is, and what we've done in the past is, you can put folks' recommendation embedded into these recommended bylaws, and you can put those changes and identify those changes by like our initials, like I can be YW, for example. And so that people then could see where all those changes are and where those thresholds are and those what the concerns are for each person. And then that way during the discussion, everybody kind of sees that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they see the suggestion, and they can have additional conversation around that.
Go ahead, Gina. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. I think the other part is that I think we're going to need a robust law opinion about our violation of GP 14 and 15, because really the conversation around liaisons revolves strictly around that interpretation of GP 14 and GP 15, and what are the ramifications of continuing to push for something that is, from what I've understood legal to present, is no longer allowed. So if it is going to be allowed to continue, I would like to have a legal opinion on exactly how that needs to be structured in order for it to maintain.
Mr. Chairman, have we gotten a legal opinion from the Attorney General's office on those policies?
Attorney General, no.
No, we have not.
We've gotten it from the
Maybe we might want to do that.
board lawyer.
Yeah, we do have a board lawyer that's given suggestions to us at this point.
Especially if we're talking in our meetings about
Yeah, but
things. Yeah,
I'm
because I heard
suggesting-
that.
I'm suggesting we get an opinion from the Attorney General's office. They will do that for us. They will give us an opinion.
Matthew DeFalco for the record. I think that's important, especially since I heard that get brought up in this meeting as a reason to do something with this. I think it's important if we're going to talk about the Attorney General's opinion, that that's in writing and that we're all seeing that.
So we're looking as a board to direct the staff to get an opinion from the Attorney General, or who are we directing to get this opinion from? Legal, go ahead.
From our attorney.
Go ahead.
She can ask for that.
Sammy Randolph for the record, Office of the General Counsel. In order to request an opinion from the AG's office, it needs to be clear what we're asking. And I'm not sure yet that this committee has delineated what the questions are related to the liaison role. So we can't just simply ask an opinion about a liaison, theoretically. We've got to outline what it is we're asking for an opinion from the AG, what they're going to opine on. Right now, it just seems a little broad. I can wait until our office receives a request in writing and we can go from there, but if you're seeking an opinion, it would be helpful to clarify the scope of the opinion.
Go ahead, Gina.
Do we need to vote before something can be sent in writing?
I think we got to get clarity on what we want before we can even bring it to legal's attention.
Well, it's,
To take it.
I mean, because we already had a meeting about GP 14. So essentially, does the committee roles violate GP 14.1, that board committees are so support the board in doing its job, not to help or advise the staff? Board committees shall normally not have direct dealings with current staff operations. That is word for word GP 14.1. So do the liaison roles for the Bond Oversight Committee violate point 1 of GP 14 Board Committee Principles?
Seems like it's a clear question. Legal, do you want to, is that clear enough, or do you need more clarification? Because that, I think that's the main question a few of the members need to know.
Because there's no point in
Hey, Chair, I think we should give legal time to research that question and then present it in our next meeting with better clarification versus just trying to, I mean, I know legal's amazing, but I don't know if they know everything top of their head. So I just want to say, give legal time to give us a good answer.
Was there enough clarity there, legal, in your opinion, or do we need to dig into this a little more deeper?
It would be my preference or our preference that you dig into it a little deeper, because it's not clear whether or not you're asking if the liaison role violates an existing governance policy of the Board of Trustees, or whether you're asking whether the liaison role is an open meeting law violation based on the duties, responsibilities that this committee has charged the liaison with. Those are two different questions for two different people to answer.
This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. My understanding and the reason why the liaison roles were cut was specifically in response to the requirements of GP 14. So that open meeting law is, while it has an impact on some of the other elements that we're discussing in the bylaws, the liaison role specifically was not in conflict with the open meeting law as far as I understood it.
Chad, go ahead.
Question for council. Would it help if Al submits something to you in writing, or or do you feel like you have what you need?
We prefer it be in writing,
Okay.
once the committee is clear in terms of what's being asked. Yep.
Okay, then the executive board will meet and we'll discuss the clarity of the question that we need to give to legals. That way they can take it. Hopefully, if it's enough, let us know, and if it's not, shoot it back. Thanks.
Perfect. I also, Chair Abraham, for the record, would also like to remind we have a motion. I made a motion on the a while ago.
And I maintain my second to table the action and discussion until next meeting.
Can we repeat the motion?
Go ahead, Abraham.
Abraham Kamel for the record. I make a motion to continue this conversation to the next meeting and add it to the agenda
As a prime topic.
as a prime topic, correct?
This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. I will second that motion.
Can it be, is this discussion?
Any discussion?
Can
Go
it
ahead.
be without an actionable item, given that we have a member of the committee who's told us she's not going to be there?
We can discuss that, how the board feels that.
An action item also allows for public comment, just FYI.
I would like it for it to not be an actionable item so that we can be fair to the person who told us she's not going to make it. I really think it's important to make sure we have Member Williams present and being able to participate in this conversation.
Even though she's going to be emailing me her concerns that we're going to be addressing for her?
Yes,
Well-
absolutely.
Yeah, I would appreciate if it's a discussion only and not for action. Because we're discussing it, but there's no opportunity to re-inform if there's a misunderstanding or not understanding what I've typed, or the position I'm taking, you know? It doesn't allow for me to have a interaction in that discussion.
Okay, is there any more discussion on this motion that's been presented?
Are we clear what it
So
is now?
So I guess the question is, would you be willing to modify your motion so that it's for discussion only?
You'll have to amend your motion, Abraham.
Abraham Kamel for the record. I'm going to amend my motion to adding this bylaws discussion to the next agenda as a priority discussion, but without action.
Taking action.
Without taking action. And having been able to have discussion about it.
This is Gina Blackman Taylor. I will second the amended motion. Second the motion for discussion only, with the understanding that we are ultimately not in control of whether or not this is approved by the Board of Trustees.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion will pass. Thank you. So since we tabled that, we are going to move on to 2.07, motions and taskings, removal of items, liaison taskings, analysis of district cost savings and options to provide access to a larger population of students. Ms. Williams, would you be able to elaborate on anything that's been
Well,
taken?
with the loss of my daughter, I haven't had a chance to follow up with Gia. And then we have the summit, the student summit on the 28th. So my energy and my conversations with CTE has been centered around that summit, getting that summit off. So I don't have an update on that.
Okay, Ms. Williams, sorry for your loss as well. Okay, then
Thank you.
we'll move forward. After that, we'll just leave it as is for now. Is there any public comment when it comes to 2.07? Hearing none. We are on to 2.08, future agenda items. I think one of the main agenda items that we've already motioned and passed is being that we will be speaking more about this bylaws overhaul, or whatever you want to call it. And the committee members that have any concerns, please email me, whatever your concerns are. And we'll share that with the executive board. Is there anything else we want to add to the next month's agenda items?
Matthew DeFalco for the record. I'd like to discuss adding our two items that we spoke about today and heard from the staff on as possible agenda items to take action on in terms of offering a recommendation to the full board. So we spoke about construction cost trends and HVACs. So I think it's important that we consider recommending something to the full board at next month's meeting.
I'm just trying to get some clarification. These presentations were given to us today as part of today's agenda. I'm trying to figure out what is it that we need to address after what was presented to us? What is
So-
it? Go ahead.
Actually acting on those. So now that we've been presented this information from the staff, we can make a recommendation to the full school board, which I think is the most power that we have as a committee. So discussing what we'd like to recommend to the board based on both presentations that were made today.
To accept or reject their presentations?
To make a recommendation. So, for example, we asked staff a couple of times exactly what he recommended we could do as a committee in terms of making a recommendation for the full school board. I think we should discuss making the specific recommendation that the staff gave us, but I'm sure that there's other opinions from the board here. But we need to take the information that was given to us and act on it. We need to recommend something to the school board.
Okay, would any other board members care to discuss or questions or opinions on Mr. DeFalco's topic of discussion?
Abraham Camille, for the record, I would also like to continue that discussion to make our recommendation. That way we can help and enable the district to give them the proper tools to, just for one, be able to address the air conditioning issues more adequately. So we want to make at least that recommendation and have that discussion, so that way we can provide Brandon's team with the proper tools. Give them more if needed.
Okay, is there any other discussion pertaining to construction costs and air conditioning index that we'd want to give some sort of recommendation to the trustees?
Mr. Chair, as it relates to the construction cost item, the few things I rattled off, Mr. DeFalco, were staff level operational items, so there's not any need for a recommendation there. There's things we're already improving or optimizing within internal processes, but certainly the HVAC, if that's a priority of the committee, I would recommend you guys have that as an agenda item.
Thank you for that, Brandon.
So do you agree, Mr. DeFalco? Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I think just for clarity, I think what I heard Brandon saying was that, for example, he didn't say this, but what he's saying is that if we have a recommendation based on the information we heard, so for example, if the way the dollars are being spent in the bond, that perhaps our recommendation, I'm not saying that that's our recommendation, I'm just, it's an example, that perhaps our recommendation to the trustees is to take a review of air conditioning and heating units and the priority it has in our funding and our plan, our master plan, and maybe that needs to be, in our opinion, needs to be reevaluated. Just throwing that out there as an example, because it seems like we're kind of going all over, and I'm not sure everybody's putting the dots together.
All right, well, let's deal with one thing at a time. When it comes to the construction review or the construction costs, let's just deal with that. That way we're not playing back and forth with two different options. When it comes to construction, the presentation.
Well, I don't know. I'm sorry, Chair. I'm not saying, I didn't want to speak for anybody. I was just throwing that out there. I don't even know if that's what they were talking about.
No,
I mean, it might be something completely different. I was just throwing that out as an example of a clear-cut recommendation based on the information we heard.
No, I understand your suggestions clearly. It's just I wanted to deal with each one at a time. That way we're not confusing each other. When it comes to the construction cost presentation that was given to us, do we want as a board to give some sort of a recommendation to the trustees? Is there any discussion on that? Just on the construction.
Matthew DeFalco, for the record. What I'm recommending is that we add that as a future agenda item to take the same language from today, construction cost trends, board recommendation, right? And then we discuss that as an actionable item and decide then whether or not we want to move on it. And the same thing in terms of 2.04 on today's agenda, system level condition index for heating, ventilation, air conditioning, board recommendation. So two separate ones is what I'm recommending.
This is Trustee Brooks. Can I be placed in the queue, please?
I'm sorry, we didn't hear you.
This is Trustee Brooks. Can I be placed into the queue?
Kathy.
I didn't hear.
I'm sorry, you're not coming through completely clearly.
Sorry, can I be placed into the queue?
Placed in the queue.
Yeah, she wants to
Yes.
be, she has a comment to make, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So she wants the public comment, so, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, just want to clarify, your existing bylaws don't have a mechanism for you to make suggestions to the Board of Trustees. So I'm a little unclear about what these agenda items would be, because you don't have a mechanism to bring those forward to the board.
As a board, we, as far as my clarity is that we do have the authority to give any recommendations that's the sole point of having the board, is to give our trustees recommendations from our board.
Can we get a legal opinion?
I'm trying to see where in your bylaws, what is the mechanism for that to occur?
Just because there is not a mechanism in our bylaws doesn't prohibit us from requesting to make a recommendation. The bylaws is not intended to give you a guidebook of, 1, 2, 3. It's to put policy in place on how we operate. There's nothing in our bylaws that restrict us from communicating with the Board of Trustees.
Do you have any clarity on that from the public comment? Because it's been clear for us for years now, that's how we're set up. So I'm a little baffled by your opinion at this point.
On page 10 of the proposed recommendations, under the part that is not pink, meaning it's been there forever, it says Section 1, in advising and making recommendations, the committee shall follow all relevant district policies, regulations, procedures, and guidelines. So, I mean, it specifically says in advising and making recommendations. I'd assume that means that we're okay to advise and make recommendations.
My question is the mechanism for you to bring it to the board. There is not one inside your policy. So I guess the expectation would be, if you're going to discuss this and give these suggestions, will it go through the district staff who interacts with the board? You don't have to answer this question at this point in time. I just want you to consider it when you discuss these 3 items moving forward.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much for your comment. Where were we before?
Can I also, Matthew Falk for the record, would our board liaison be interested in communicating any recommendations to the board?
Are you referring to the trustee liaison?
Right, that's what I was referring to. I was hoping she could answer that. Would she be okay with communicating recommendations from our board to her board?
That's the whole purpose of the trustee liaison.
Oh, that might be helpful then.
But she's...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, by the time that you have recommendations, I won't be on the board. So you'll have to ask the next board liaison.
Yeah, she's not on the phone anymore to answer that, but that's the whole point of the... Oh,
She'll be off the board by the time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see your point. Okay, well, thank you very much. Where were we before? We had a...
Construction and HVAC and making recommendations as part of the future agenda.
That's right. So we have our motions first and a second to put these 2 items on next month's agenda, correct?
Yes, I believe I motioned and Abraham seconded.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor from Matt DeFalco.
Wait.
Yes, I can. Give me 1 second.
Go ahead, Matt DeFalco.
Under future agenda planning, I motion to include system-level condition index for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning board recommendation, as well as secondarily, construction cost trends board recommendation.
And I second that. Abraham Kamel for the record. I motion to second.
Well, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. DeFalco to put these 2 items on the agenda for next month's meeting. And we have a second from Mr. Abraham Camejo. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. All right. Where are we here? Are there any other items for future agenda other than what's been proposed up to this point from the committee? Go ahead, Gina.
This is Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. Then I propose for a future agenda item that we get that updated cost comparison between the modernizations and the update, basically the update of what was at the end of the CIP 5 presentation. May have also been in part of the CIP 6. Do you know which document I'm talking about?
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, you're talking about like the pinwheel looking one that's got the pie chart of the breakouts? Of need?
Well, there was also one that was a bar chart that showed the deficiencies in the overall
Yeah.
$7.5 billion budget and where those costs were being allocated. Because if we're going to make a recommendation of any kind to the Board of Trustees, I think any information that helps us give that fuller picture would be useful.
Okay, so do we need to get that in the form of motion to add that on?
I motion that we include a document on the current spending levels for the CIP with markings for the deficiencies in renovations and new schools.
We have a motion on the floor to add this.
If I can
future-
ask for a correction before,
Go on,
you have to say, so instead of spending, budget. Because I think the one you're referencing is how we're budgeting throughout the streams for the entirety of the bond,
Thank
right?
you. The
Yeah.
budgeted numbers
Okay.
for the spending of the $7.5 billion. Thank you for the clarification.
We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Gina to add future spending budget. Say, I'm sorry.
The budget for the CIP spending.
We have a motion to put the budget for CIP spending on next month's agenda.
Abraham Kamel for the record. I second that motion.
We have a second by Mr. Comejo. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Once again, is there any other items that we need to add to next month's future agenda? Or any time in the foreseen future? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, in
Go
full
ahead.
transparency, staff did intend to provide a overview of the facility master plan effort that'll be starting up. So that'll be an additional item that'll be on the agenda.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, we're going to move on to 3.01, public comment. Mr. Fred Smith? No, I think he has decided not to. Once again, I appreciate your presence and your knowledge. It really meant a lot to me personally. Thank you. Moving on to the final thing, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion. So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And if- Against, nay. Hearing none. We are done. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.